Okay. And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of CoCo TALK, the nation's leading, not to mention the nation's only, live weekly talk show about the Tandy Color Computer. And it's great to be back, and it's great to have a nice panel with us, as always, and we've got a great kind of primary topic this week. We're going to be talking about color computer hardware, both real hardware and emulated hardware, as far as, you know, FPGAs and nanos and stuff like that. So with us to start, and hopefully more people will kind of come in and out of the Skype call, but Mark Overholzer, how are you?
I'm doing fine.
Mark, you know what? I don't know that we've done this, so I thought it might be a nice time to start off with everybody giving a little mini introduction about, you know, just their short history. Like, what's your retro experience? What did you used to do? What did you used to like doing? What do you do now? So you want to kick it off, Mark, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Overholzer, and I'm from Oregon in the U.S., and I'm kind of new to the CoCo, actually. Story on that is that there was a guy I knew in the town where I live who had an Apple IIe Platinum and a monitor and some stuff, and he wanted to get rid of it. So I offered him some money, and he gave me stuff. It was a CoCo 3. It's like, what am I do with that? I never was into CoCos back in the day. You know, 6809, this was like kind of cool, and, you know, I think I'm going to do this. Well, since that point, 5 years ago, I added a 64K 2637B with the lowercase, and then I got another CoCo 2 with 16K, and it came with a free CoCo 1 4K that actually worked when I got it.
Wow.
And then just in December, I bought the last few Dragons, 64K Dragons. I own 4 CoCos and a Dragon now. But yeah, I wasn't into CoCos back in the day.
Okay. I'm hearing a little bit of kind of like microphone hiss coming from you. Like, I don't know if your mic's close to you or not, but it's kind of, as you were speaking, it was kind of like wind noise was cutting you out sometimes. Just FYI.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's actually an overhead mic, and it's about 2 feet from me. So.
Huh.
Anyway.
Okay. So you're new to the CoCo. What did you start off with back in the day? What was your original platform?
Apple II Plus in high school, and then my dad bought a Sinclair ZX81 kit. My uncle did also. I still have both of those, by the way. And then I bought an Apple IIe with a friend, and then later I bought a Commodore SX64, which is a little briefcase one, because also all my family had Commodores, except for my one uncle who had an Atari, the 400, 800.
Wow. Nice cross-section of 80s technology. Sounds like you grew up on.
Yeah, definitely. I'm old school geek nerd. So
very cool.
My interest today is basically just, retro computers, including the CoCo, and I've been really interested in the networking stuff. There's the networking options for the Apple, and there's some coming out for the CoCo, and so I've been thinking about retro games, redoing them or patching them so they could be networked and have people play, multiplayer.
Oh, wow. That would be great. That would be great.
Think Minecraft or, that have, it could be a text adventure. You could do adventure with, multiple real people. So
yeah.
In that direction, getting networking stuff set up and then figuring out how to either rewrite or patch stuff. So
that's cool. That's a great project. I'm looking forward to that.
It'd be another way to socialize.
Yeah, definitely. Just real quick, I want to acknowledge a few people who have chimed in the YouTube chat as well. So Curtis Boyle's here saying, afternoon, everyone. Hello, Curtis. Davey Mitchell is here saying, good evening. Hello, Davey. And Jason Rothberg says, hello, everybody. So hello, Jason. Very cool. Glad you guys can join us already. And next up, David Ladd, the handsome devil with the sunglasses. You've been on the talk dozens of times, and we all kind of know you as our personal kind of punching bag. We love to poke fun. David Ladd is kind of like the OS9 of our retro friends. We just like to bash him for no particular reason. Richard Cavell is here. Hello, Richard. Wayne Campbell is here. So give us your life story in 1 minute or less, David. Time's up. Okay.
Very funny. Well, my first computer would have been the Color Computer 2 in 1984. And then 3 months later, I acquired the floppy drive. So I was lucky enough that my parents actually got me quite a bit of stuff all at once. I started off with the CoCo 2, the multi-pack, the sound speech cartridge, and the RS-232 pack.
Wow.
And then, like I said, 3 months later, then my parents got me the floppy drive and OS 9 level 1 and the development kit that came with that. So it was an interesting time.
Wow, you kind of jumped into the deep end of CoCo hardware and software almost like on day one, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's cool.
So then I was fiddling with that. Let's see here. And then it would have been 87. I got my first CoCo 3. And then, of course, got OS 9 level 2 for it. Then, of course, ran into some issues with when you'd flip screens that the CoCo 3 would sometimes lock up, and found it was because the gimme, the 86 gimme, had to replace that with the 87 gimme. Then I got a VIC-20. Yeah, I played a few games on it, and then went back to the CoCo.
You strayed for a little bit.
And then moved into the MM1. Still had the CoCo 3, but was playing with the MM1 for a while. And then strayed from the CoCo and the MM1 for the PC for a few years, since I was a PC tech. So, that's pretty much all I had time for many years. So, usually if it was CoCo, it was emulator. So, and then the last 5-6 years back to the...
Sorry to cut you off. I couldn't help here. Curtis's comment here. Curtis and his Canadian humor, but he's like, David jumping into the deep end right off the bat with hardware and software. Is that why he lost all his hair?
Wow, Curtis.
Wow, Curtis. He went there early into the program as well. Sorry about that, David, but it was too good to. Grant Leedy just joined us. Hello, Grant. How are you?
Usually Canadian polite.
You mentioned the MM1, and I've recently become aware of that through Curtis talking about it as well and showing it off at CoCo Fest a couple years ago. That was kind of the spiritual successor to the CoCo 3, technically one of a few aftermarket CoCo 4 products that existed for a time.
It was specifically to focus on the OS 9 users, because the fact that it was the 68,000 based OS 9.
Oh, okay.
And also, unlike the CoCo, where OS 9 on the CoCo only supports 256 byte sectors for the floppies and hard disks and whatever, it's the trickery of, the driver programmers that made it possible to use the hard drives that have 512 and higher sector sizes. But OS 9 on the MM1 could do it, pretty much any sector size on its own. So it was good times. I think the MM1 was modeled on the same hardware, I think, that was in the Philips Magnavox CDI machine, if I believe I'm on that. But that's another time for that whole thing.
Sure. Very cool. So you've had quite the history with color computers. Sounds like you were off to a great initial start, and then you kind of graduated to some of the bigger platforms. And fast forward to today, what is your retro hobbies of choice? What do you like to do, and what do you play with?
Well, still CoCo 3 with the original MPI and CoCo SDC, Sound Speech Cartridge, Super IDE, and the FD502 controller.
All right. Can you squeeze any more acronyms in there?
Well, actually, if I had a 16-slot MPI, I could probably go into the Orchestra 90, the Canton, the Glenside IDE. I could keep going.
There you go. Very cool. Well, we're always happy to have you here, Mr. Ladd. And the person who looks like a green screen is none other than Bill Nobel. How's it going, eh?
Not so bad.
And Bill Nobel is one of our two guests of honors today. And you want to give us your little mini life story, Bill?
Oh, now that goes back a long way.
First there was darkness, and then there was light,
Yeah.
and then there was Bill Nobel.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I guess I started into the electronics and the computer industry when I was about 8. Is when I started. My brother actually got me involved in electronics because he was doing courses for studying to be an electrical engineer, and that's how I basically started. And the first introduction to a computer was when he actually bought a kit called the ELF 1802.
Wow.
Which is actually a board that you actually hand assembled, and it was an actual 8-bit bare bones computer with no screen, no keyboard other than a 16 key hex keypad that you actually programmed. From there, he graduated to an XD Sorcerer, which I basically took over on him. And then finally, I actually got into a CoCo 1. And then it just progressed from there to the CoCo 2, then to the CoCo 3. And once I got the CoCo 3, I got introduced to OS 9.
Neat.
And that's how I actually got my workings into OS 9. And then at that point, basically, Curtis and I discovered about the 6309. And that's where we actually started the initial port of getting OS 9 fully optimized to run under the 6309, hence the born of Nitrous 9.
Okay. And
ever since then,
what got you into programming? When did you start knowing how to do assembly and writing operating systems and reverse engineering, decompiling, all that kind of stuff?
actually that started with the 1802 ELF 2.
Okay, so you had a history of coding all along.
Yes.
Okay, and you and thanks for helping us last week too with our OS 9 presentation. So you're obviously influential in the kind of genesis of Nitrous 9 from what it was, and you're still actively working on it today, as we will see, which is great. And what do you like to tinker with these days?
I'm still programming. That's basically it, and plus I got a few other little projects on the side. Like I've got a couple of single board computers on breadboards that I've been playing with, Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, a little bit of everything.
And I can't wait to get into that conversation because the new type of hardware things that we have available to us is so fascinating to me. And certainly not least, but last for now, Mr. Jim Brain of Retro Innovations. And I just want to start off by saying I really enjoyed your interview on this month's CoCo Crew podcast. It was really good. I know enough to be dangerous with hardware, but I just enjoyed hearing things from your perspective. So thanks for doing that for us all.
No problem. So obviously I don't want to rehash stuff that was said on there per se, but I've been in the classic computer arena for quite a while, but relatively new to the CoCo community, probably since 2014, I would say, is my introduction. And but I've been doing hardware development, and I've been selling products since probably about 2004. And so that's kind of where I come from.
Very cool. Very cool. And we're really looking forward to not only hearing about these today, but actually being able to see them too, which is one of the nice benefits of a video versus the audio discussion. So that's great. And Curtis is here, and Grant Leedy is here, and a few of us in the chat are here. It's great. So thanks for taking that few minutes there to kind of introduce everybody. I kind of always assume everybody knows everybody and everybody knows everything, but I'm sure there's some people who've watched us who maybe, okay, well, we've heard the name David, we've heard the name, but yeah, thanks guys for that little thing there. And I'm Steve Strobridge. I'm your host here, and my history was my first computer was a color computer in 1981, had a 16K silver CoCo. That's what I kind of cut my teeth with computers and technology, and I learned how to program in BASIC. And unlike David Ladd, I did not start in the deep end of technology wealth. I had a silver CoCo 16K and a cassette player, and took me several years to work my way up to hard drives and floppy drives and extended BASIC and stuff. So I kind of grew into it and learned as I could afford to expand that. I made it all the way to the CoCo 3, but by the time I got a CoCo 3, it was around 1986. The Tandy 1000 had also come out, and I started doing that, and I became a PC person at that time. So I kind of cut short the CoCo 3 before I even had a chance to learn it, because I just kind of jumped ship. Sockmaster's here. Hey, Sockmaster. So, but, I kind of grew up with the color computer, and I programmed in BASIC throughout the 80s and most of the 90s, mostly recreational, nothing commercial or serious. And then, a couple years ago, I started doing YouTube and started doing color computer videos, and that's how I learned about the community and met all these incredible people. And here we are. So that's my short story. And we're now on episode 19 of CoCo Talk, which blows my mind that we've done this. And every week I'm like, well, what are we going to talk about this week? And every week I'm like, well, I hope we have something to talk about next week. But we're going on 20 weeks, and we continue to... we continue to have things to talk about, and people who are willing to share stuff with us. And it's we're definitely, this show is nowhere near the caliber of the CoCo Crew podcast. It's not meant to be competition or replacement, but it's a great filler, because my only regret about the podcast is it's only once a month. So what do we do for the rest of our time? So hopefully this is the junk food until you get your good steak and potatoes each month. These are your snacks to hold you over. So I like doing this show. I kind of like the freeformness of it, and the fluidity of it, and it's kind of fun, and it's been great. Yeah, so Grant Leedy says, yay, number 19. Yeah, and by the way, anybody who's text chatting right now, feel free to call in on the Skype call if you'd like to call in to us and stuff. And we're here, and so much like the CoCo Crew, which is where I got my inspiration, I think sometimes we have topics that occur in the community that inspire at least a news segment or a discussion or something like that. And one of those topics, which I'm going to pull up on the screen right now, was a discussion that popped up on the mailing list about hardware. So let me just bring that up right now. And so this topic came up. This is my Gmail. And don't worry about these ads for mail enhancement. That's completely random spam. But yeah, so the conversation came from Walter Zamboti or Bati. And by the way, he's an Aussie. So good day to you, Walter. And he started off, and this was dated July 25th. So it was only 4 days ago. And he's basically asking the question, what's the difference between software emulation and hardware emulation, and why are some faster than others, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he was trying to start his voyage of understanding and discovery, and it's basically prompted 53 responses. So a lot of people chiming in, a lot of people weighing in, and I found this really fascinating because my understanding of hardware is very peripheral. I understand PC hardware, so when I change a component, it's an entire graphics card or whatever. I don't solder, I don't understand circuits, but I do understand some basic hardware concepts on a modern PC. Retro hardware is something I kind of sort of understand, and then the whole virtual hardware thing is it's really interesting and exciting, and I'm hoping we can discuss all of those things today. So this was the thread that started that. I also want to show something real quick too before we get into the hardware discussions, because this just showed up on Facebook last night, but this is kind of, and I love how Jim's catchphrase for this was perfect. This is literally like Inception here, because what happened here is, for those who don't know the story, if you haven't heard the song Gameplay Goodness, well, I would say, well, what rock have you been under? But other than that, if you haven't heard the song Gameplay Goodness, I'll try to give you the short version of that song. So, Mike Rowan from the CoCo Crew podcast, as I like to call him, Myro, took some samples from one of my YouTube videos, turned it into a song, and it was a commercial that aired, I don't know if it was last month or the month before, and it was basically a commercial featuring Mike's music, and he kind of made like a little bit of a hip-hop rap song with my stupid voice in it, and it came out to be pretty cool. I took that audio, I turned that into a music video with some video game clips, I put that on YouTube. And then Glenn Hewlett, who we recently talked with, who did the Pac-Man's transcode, took my YouTube video, converted that video to play on a CoCo 1 of all things. And now you're going to see my Gameplay Goodness video playing on a CoCo 1 back on YouTube. So it's come full circle. And here we go, because this to me is utterly amazing. And I think I've got sound sharing, so let me know if you guys in the call can hear it. Can you hear it?
Yep.
It's not that loud though.
Yep.
But yeah, this looks like it's an artifacting video. So it's like a P Mode 4 video. You can tell that it's a little bit grainy, but from the 3 or 4 feet back, it looks like he's got some good colors in there. Obviously, the red and blues are, you know, native to the artifact mode, but it looks kind of cool. And I never would have imagined in 1980, whenever, that we would see video. I didn't even, you know, we didn't conceive video in video games. You know, everything was two-dimensional. Everything was kind of pixel-based, vector-based. Full motion video really didn't become a thing till the 90s. So this was a completely foreign concept during the time of the CoCo, and the fact that we've got the ability to play media players even on a CoCo 1 right now is pretty amazing, in my humble opinion. So that was kind of cool, and it was kind of flattering too, because you know, to have something that you know, that obviously has got a little bit of me in it, and it's just a big full circle of a bunch of people in the community working on stuff, I thought was pretty cool. So I like that. Evan Wright just came in. Wayne Campbell's here. Wayne Campbell says, what am I missing here? Sockmaster says at least the show doesn't have a drinking game, so I won't get drunk. Okay, I'm missing some of the chatter here. Let's go back here and look at this. So Retro Innovations says que pasa. Sockmaster said hola. So we have some multilingual people going on here. Sockmaster says, I figured I'd stop working, and so I'm tuning in. Grant says, yay, number 19. Wayne Campbell was saying something about LOL to Sockmaster. Generally, late September, we'll get mini breaks. All right. 23 frames per second at 0.89 megahertz. That's like 6 cycles per byte drawn to the screen. All right, so talking about the video there, yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. I like that, so I wanted to share that. We'll get into some more stuff that's going on Facebook and stuff later, but let's jump into the meat and potatoes of today's topic, which is hardware. And who wants to be our first guinea pig / sacrificial lamb? Bill, do you want to go first and talk about the CoCo on a chip?
Yeah, I could do the first run, I guess.
Okay. And again, something else I know enough to be dangerous about, but this is emulated hardware that is running like a real CoCo.
Yes.
Okay. And you've got it up on screen as we're looking at right now. Nick Morentis has just joined us. G'day, Nick.
G'day, how are you?
And what I see on the monitor right there looks like a CoCo standard VDG screen, our infamous nuclear green color there.
Yes.
But this is not a real CoCo, correct?
No, it is not. This is actually running on Roger Taylor's nano version of what he calls the CoCo on a chip.
Okay.
Which is actually been nicknamed Cyclone right now.
Okay.
And basically, it's a little board called the D0 Nano, which is a fairly small board. I'll just...
Yeah, I want to get
That's
that
it
to where
right
we
there.
can see it. Okay.
Okay, and it's pretty basic. The D0 is on the bottom, which is where the gold legs are attached to. And on the top is an actual daughter board, which actually contains the two 512K SRAM chips to give you a total of 1 mega RAM.
Okay.
And of course, there is a Wi-Fi module, which is tied to RS-232, because there's two RS-232 ports built in.
Okay.
Wi-Fi is taking up one of them. And underneath, there is a Bluetooth module. And this guy right here, it's the 24-bit DAC chip, which gives you all the audio in full stereo. And the rest of it is these guys here are transistors to do the level conversion from 5 volts to 3.3, because FPGAs are 3.3 volt based. So they're just a level shifter to bring 5 volts down to 3 and 3 back up to 5.
Okay.
And the rest of the resistors here are for the actual VGA circuit to give you the actual 6-bit color. And of course, there's the SD module, which are removed so you can see the actual RAM chips, but it's a standard SD module, which is actually the same exact module that's used in the CoCo SDC.
Okay.
And so I'll just plug that guy back in and power it back up. But now, of course, you see Roger's got the actual ROM image from Disk Extender 2.1, and he's actually modified it so that it will actually use the SD card instead of the floppy drive.
So it's kind of like a hybrid Disk Extender Color Basic and SDC DOS built into one thing?
Yes, it's almost identical to the SDC DOS. For mounting disks, it's exactly the same. You type drive space 0, quote, image name. Okay. So for those familiar with running the CoCo SDC on a real CoCo, there should be a very short learning curve. Yeah, very short learning curve. It took me about maybe 15 minutes to get into the scheme that Roger used, because there's just a couple minor differences, but still the same. Yeah, and I do recall some chatter on the Facebook group and how I guess the file system has changed over time, and you've now got it to where that SD card is just a straight up FAT32. Or something like that, which means it's kind of universal. You can plug it into a PC or a Mac and drop things on it. It's drag and drop, basically. You take disk images and you drop it right on the SD card, and away you go. Yeah. Yeah, and the VGA output looks real clean here from what we can see. The green looks pretty good. You know, it looks like the green we all know and love, or hate, depending on. Yeah. It looks like a CoCo. And Roger's actually got the kind of a simulated artifacting color in place, so that it actually some of the artifacting games will actually look proper on the Nano. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's been heavily working to get that part of the video perfected. Okay. Yeah, and I don't know if he's also kind of communicating with Brendan Donahue, who is also doing a similar project, because Brendan's doing artifacting on his CoCo VGA project for the CoCo 2, I think was what that runs on. Cool. Yeah, I believe that's what he's doing. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. I like what I see so far. One of the questions that came up in the original thread on the mailing list was, well, what controls the speed of these things, and what do they actually run as? Because they're saying the FPGA board runs at 50 megahertz. Why do some computers run at 25, and why can an emulator run at 133, and why can't VCC run faster because it's on a gigahertz Pentium? And what ultimately, at the end of the day, controls the speed of these kind of, hybrid hardware systems? Okay, well, that's getting into a little bit of the actual hardware side. The reason the actual FPGA itself, well, in the Nano's case, it defaults to 50 megahertz. You've got a 50 megahertz clock available. And each piece of hardware you attach to it, whether it be real hardware, whether it be the SRAM chips or VGA or whatever, each has to talk at a different speed. So in VGA's case, it's usually a 25 megahertz signal that's actually used to produce a video signal. So there comes the 25 megahertz that most people are aware of. Now, the RAM chips, in this case, on the Nano, it's using a 10 nanosecond access time on the SRAM, which, to run anything above 7 megahertz, you're going to get corruption over time. Okay. And so that's why on the Nano, you'll see it running at 7 megahertz versus the Gary Becker's project of the FPGA. His version is using a higher speed SRAM, so his runs at 25 megahertz. So just like on a physical computer, the rule of you're only as fast as your slowest component is still true, and your overall bus speed can't exceed the speed of the RAM or the CPU. Yes. Okay. That I understand. Yeah. Now, one thing that Roger's actually got in place here on the Nano is he's got a register in place that you can actually do a couple of pokes, and you can actually change the speed of the actual Nano. So if you actually had better speed RAM chips, you can actually boost it to the full 25 megahertz.
Okay. And then again, I'm going to be asking a lot of dumb questions because I only know what I hear and think I comprehend by listening to them. But I know some of the CoCo software is based off of a lot of things have to synchronize to the screen refresh. I hear this come up many times where the screen refresh is 60 frames per second is kind of the threshold you need to work within, or that would technically be 60 hertz. How does that refresh rate of the computer screen factor into the timing of the motherboards and the virtual processors and the VGA output and all that kind of stuff?
Okay, well, right now, by straight power up, you're running at the standard CoCo 3.89 megahertz.
Okay.
And actually, Roger and I have been using actual John Kowalski's or Sockmaster's demos to actually perfect that timing.
Okay.
And, well, a perfect example.
Boink. Sounds like something Shaggy from Scooby-Doo would say. Boink? And what do we... Oh, look at that. Look
and this,
at
of course,
that.
is Sockmaster's bouncing ball demo.
Yep.
You can still, there's still a little bit of a factor for timing yet that Roger's still trying to figure out. You can see at the bottom here, kind of pointed out, there's a 1 pixel line here that's fluctuating a little bit.
Okay.
That he's still trying to get that timed out yet perfectly.
Right, and in the bounce, I see a little bit of lag here and there. It's not a completely fluid bounce, but it's still very impressive.
Yeah, because actually, we discovered that this demo will only run on any of the FPGA projects, but on the Nano itself.
Okay.
Gary's project doesn't do it. None of them actually do it. Because one thing Roger did do is he actually took Greg Miller's code for the 6009, which is true cycle accurate, and put it onto the actual Nano, and also tweaked timing so that it's as close to the 60 or CoCo 3 itself.
Okay. So are there risks if you're running a CoCo faster than it was designed that it will break certain software?
No.
No?
The only thing that you will notice is that if you're running the stock 0.89 megahertz or 1.78 megahertz, you're okay. But as soon as you jump into the 7 megahertz, of course, your games are going to go a lot faster.
Okay. But it's not going to break the compatibility of the software running on this virtual hardware?
No.
Okay.
Because that's where those registers come in, where you can actually physically change the speed based on what hardware you have.
And what about some of the games that take advantage of screen refresh timings, like things like Dragonfire, where they're mixing modes at different scan line intervals and things like that? Would that be affected if you ran the computer faster than the stock megahertz speed?
No, because there's built-in compensation based off of that. So the actual timing is always going to be the same.
Okay. I guess in my mind, what I can't unshackle is the fact that on a real CoCo, everything was kind of dictated by the physical speed of the CPU. All that timing came from that, or vice versa. I don't know how it all connects, but I'm trying to understand the relationship to CPU speed versus screen refresh and how that affects software tricks that do all kinds of cool, VDG hacks and stuff like that,
Well, that's just it, Steve. The actual hardware is for the VGA is the one that produces that VSync cycle.
Okay.
That actually feeds that to the CPU and says, okay, I'm giving you this every 60th of a second.
Okay, and so that becomes constant. So the video controller is kind of a constant frequency versus the CPU speed and stuff like that.
Yes.
Bill though if you had a demo or something that wasn't relying on checking for a scan line or whatnot, but was just outputting data to the gimme at CPU speed after it got hit to say, okay, the 60th of a second has happened, and I'm going to put data out onto the out onto the data bus or whatnot, that storage into the gimme space is going to go much faster, right? So if it's assuming that each one of those writes is going to take a certain amount of time, it doesn't take that much time anymore. How will that affect the screen output or whatever?
It won't actually affect the screen output in a sense, because it's the actual gimme is the one that's getting the information and then translating it to the video. So there'll be basically the gimme will get the information a lot faster, but it still has to feed it to the video at that constant speed.
Got it. So what about sounds, though? If somebody was saying, I want to do DAC music or whatnot, but I want to do it at 0.89 megahertz, and then I jump it up to 7 megahertz, wouldn't the sound be compressed?
That will get affected, Jim.
Okay.
The actual sound circuitry itself is not a clock-based system. It's back to the old CoCo 3 days where you got the DAC itself, which you're playing with registers to change frequencies and do so on and so forth. So if you move from a 0.89 to a 7 megahertz, of course your sound routines are going to get affected if you're programmed it for a 0.89.
There would be a higher frequency, I take it?
Higher frequency and faster.
Right. Now, Sockmaster is asking, what happens if you run Boink at 7 megahertz?
That I haven't actually tried yet, Sockmaster. Because I
open up some type of space-time vortex or wormhole or anything.
It would be interesting to find out.
Bill.
Yeah. Now John's actually got me onto one that I'm going to try later on.
Yeah, and I would like to, when you're done with that too, to explain to anybody who's never seen this. Tell us basically what are some of the components that are required to assemble one of these, and what's the process like? Like if somebody wants to build one of these, newfangled CoCo hardware projects, what are they looking at as far as parts and materials and time and cost and things like that?
Okay, the actual parts itself, well, of course, you would need a D0 Nano, which is a Cyclone product. The actual daughter board itself is Roger has available on OSH Park, where you can actually order the boards.
Was that a custom designed PCB type thing?
Yes. Yeah, it's actually a custom designed PCB, which is, of course, what you see here, which is where the VGA connector and the SD module, the two SRAMs, and all these resistors are attached to. Those boards are actually $80 for a set of 3, because OSH Park, their minimum board order is 3 for some reason. I don't know why. The actual parts themselves, Roger's got a shopping cart with DigiKey. That's about $40 altogether. And then, the Nano, the price varies depending on where you get it from, anywhere from $80 to $120. So roughly a little over $200, and you actually can build yourself a full FPGA version of a CoCo. Okay,
so everything we're looking at right there, the kind of electronic guts on the table there, that's about $200 and change for those parts.
Yes.
How does it get its power?
Okay, the actual power itself is actually standard mini USB. I don't know if you can see that in the video here. It's kind of plugged into the bottom there. Gotcha.
So you could power it from a PC, or if you have a modern television monitor that's got a USB port on that, you could do that.
Yeah. And in my case here, I've actually got a standard iPad charging block.
Gotcha. I was going to say that other power supply seems a bit overkill.
Yeah. No, that's actually for the other projects I got going on over here.
Inside Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory. Now, we have John Strong in the text chat. I don't know if John's going to call in. I'd love to have John Strong chime in on this too. But John Strong, I think, is potentially working on a 3D printed case for this as well. So we can have a nice a little box to snap it up in. Are there any heat issues if it's completely sealed? Does it need a ventilation space? Does it need a heat sink or a ventilation or fans or anything like that?
Absolutely not. This thing runs so cool, it's not even funny. I've actually have it basically powered on and running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only time it's not powered up is when I'm doing an update from Roger or
Okay.
updates to the SD card.
Right. So this is this is definitely a DIY, do-it-yourself type thing here. You've got to order the parts. You've got to assemble the parts. The process of assembling them, what types of tools and skills does one need? Are they all snapped together? Soldering iron required, things like that?
Yeah, basic soldering skills, soldering iron solder, pair of wire cutters for trimming off excess components. That's about it. If you're decent with a soldering iron, this is an easy job.
Okay. And as part of the project website. Now, is there an actual website for this? I know there's a Facebook group. Does he have like a blog or a GitHub or something like that?
He does actually have a couple of pages set up.
Okay.
Here, I'll just bring them up on a different computer here, and I will pop that into the chat for the link.
There you go. Curtis Boyle is saying, ask Bill about the Gimme and CPU extensions that Roger has been adding, as well as the higher screen modes, new assembly commands, etc.
Okay, yes, that's actually something that I was going to get into in a bit here.
Okay, that's fine then.
What Roger has actually done is he's added 2 extra pieces of hardware to the CoCo in this incarnation.
Okay.
He's added a graphics processing unit
Okay.
in hardware that allows you to actually do spriting, all kinds of different things at tremendous speed.
Wow.
He's also added an FPU, or a fixed point unit, which is math. So he has actual the math coprocessor built into hardware.
Oh, wow.
And that coprocessor is actually kind of phenomenal. I've been playing with it for the last week.
Okay.
And that thing is freaking fast. It does most calculations in one single E-cycle of the CPU.
Okay. Hopefully some people out there know what you mean by saying that. So
it's basically one cycle on the CPU is usually, different instructions will take different cycle speeds.
Okay.
Like a load A would be like 6 cycles. Whereas this FPU, once you actually execute the command, it returns that within 1 cycle.
Okay. So it is essentially it's a CoCo clone, or it's a CoCo compatible system, but there is some enhancements to it as well, which I would imagine that is it Gary Becker. I always screw up Gary Becker. I want to say Glenn for some reason. So Gary Becker's FPGA is also kind of like a CoCo Plus, right? There's more functionality to it than an original CoCo. All right, so you are doing what now? You're loading something up?
Yeah, I'm actually bringing up a demo that actually kind of shows off all 3 of the actual hardware enhancements that are in the Nano.
Okay.
It'll show off the GPU, it'll show off the FPU, as well as the AY 3020 sound chip that's built into it as well.
It's got a sound chip. Is there a toaster or maybe a Keurig thing that can make coffee that comes with this too? Or
well, actually, there's a couple extra things in there too. Yeah, because it's not just the standard CoCo 3.6-bit DAC and the AY sound chip. There's also an Orchestra 90 built right into it as well.
Now, how much would you pay? But wait, there's more. If you act now, we'll throw in a bamboo steamer and a set of Ginsu knives. And this ties into another topic that was brought up a while ago about when, what's too much when it comes to a hardware or a project, and when does a CoCo cease to become a CoCo and become, an abomination or something else. If you're a fan of the CoCo, which I am, and I think a lot of people are, you almost want to say there can't be too much. There's no such thing. I got to have more cowbell.
Well, that's exactly it. Like Roger's added all those pieces of hardware, plus he's actually taken the Gimme and actually enhanced it even more by using some of the unused bits to actually give you extra video modes and a few other things.
Wow.
So I don't know if how many people are familiar with Chris Lamont, but he had a Mandelbrot renderer for the CoCo 3, which took pretty much days to actually produce the actual image.
Okay.
Whereas Roger's taken that code with Chris's permission and actually modified it to actually use the FPU and the GPU functionality of the Nano by putting it into full 640 by 480, 256 colors.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it is phenomenal. And this is basically drawing the whole image with having the AY chip sound in the background. I don't know how well the sound is coming through.
Sounds fine.
Yeah. But you could see how fast the actual GPU is FPU is going.
Yeah.
Because it'll actually do this screen in a little over about 2 minutes.
Yeah, John Mark Mobley just joined us. Hey, John.
Some Castlevania music.
I'm not sure which song Roger chose here on this one, but
now, did your video feed freeze, or is it still stuck on like a 1/3 screen right now?
No, it's actually still progressing. I can see it going in the Skype call. It's a little hard to see the 640 resolution being drawn, though, I would assume.
I still see, okay, it's still drawing, okay. Okay, and this is called a Mandelbrot. I remember seeing these things on IBM systems,
Yeah, they physically, without an FPU, they would physically take a long time to draw.
So this was like back in the days of the PCs where you had a math coprocessor you could put on there as well.
Yeah. Now, basically what I'm doing now is I'm actually changing the actual zoom level. I'm going to zoom in on this area. And this actual square is being done by the GPU. Okay. But Roger's got some different effects in there for anding and oring just to kind of show it off.
Okay.
So I'll just choose that spot there. And then it'll start the redraw of that area, converting it. And this thing you can just keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in.
Wow. To infinity and beyond, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Sockmaster was answering an earlier question. He says it's still a CoCo because these extensions follow what additional enhanced hardware on real CoCo would be like. And he says it's not going to be light speed because Mandelbrot is really heavy to compute. Okay. That's one thing that we kind of get spoiled by on modern hardware is the fact that some things are somewhat instantaneous.
Yeah, well, it's also, like I said, when Chris Lamont actually did this on the CoCo 3, it literally took days to draw.
Wow. And the fact it's playing music in the background the whole time and you can interact with it and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah,
because actually what Roger did in this particular example is the AY chip he has on a Gimme Timer IRQ at 50 hertz, which basically is just pumping data to the AY chip and then using the internal FPU and GPU to do the actual calculations and drawing on the screen.
Okay.
So there's very little CPU overhead being used in this particular demo.
Okay. So while that's still doing its thing, because it's kind of cool to look at, let me just get back to asking you some questions about the hardware platform itself. So there is a list of parts you can order and assemble. So you've purchased all of the physical components, you've connected them, you've soldered them, you've done all your stuff. What's the next step? How does it go from the hardware assembly to being this? Yeah, I'm assuming you have to download the software or firmware to put into the system?
Yes, there is a file that Roger produces usually about once a month that you actually have to program into the DE0 Nano. And of course, that is done with a program called Quartus. It's a standard PC Linux program that you actually put on a PC, hook the Nano into that, and basically this file that you get from Roger, you program into the Nano, and away you go.
Okay. And how do you connect the Nano to your PC? I'm assuming over the same USB cable?
Yeah, the exact same USB cable, which is right now connected into just
To the
a power
charger.
block right now.
Right. Okay. So you would assemble the hardware components, you would plug it into your PC, and through some software running on a modern computer, you would basically download or install the software onto this hardware package you've created.
Yes.
And
basically, it gets
ahead.
stored on the actual Nano itself. Any of the pieces that you build, like it's the bottom board here, which is the Nano, you're basically just programming the actual FPGA chip itself.
And that's something I barely grasp, and so I'm going to ask him a bunch of more dumb questions about that. But this was explained in the thread as being emulated hardware. So in a sense, it is a piece of hardware, but it is a generic piece of hardware that you can order that then through software running on another machine, you can tell this hardware what to do. You give it an identity, basically. So it's programmable hardware.
Yes, like FPGA is basically stands for a field programmable gate array. Now, what these chips do is they have what's embedded into them what are called logical elements that you can actually change.
Okay.
Basically, it's like a simple on-off switch. And you basically tell that which elements you want on and off to actually match a piece of hardware. Like an AND gate or a NOR gate or an OR gate, various different types of gates. And that's basically, you combine multiple of those things together to actually make either a CPU or a VGA circuit, which are all digital-based electronics.
Okay. So the things that most people write in emulation, where you're having software pretend to be hardware, which is what a standard high-level emulator does, this is having software telling this hardware to act as
what to do.
Specific types of hardware components. And you're basically building a single board computer, essentially, where you've got a CPU, the gimmies on here. The RAM is physical. I would imagine it. I don't know how easy it is to facilitate, emulated RAM.
Yeah.
But
it is capable in the FPGA to actually program RAM on chip.
Okay.
But it does take up a lot of space. Like in the Nano's case, there's roughly 220,000 logical elements that you can actually program, and each piece of hardware that you program into the FPGA takes up so much of those elements. So RAM, if you actually do it into the FPGA, takes up a lot of those elements.
Okay. And honestly, real RAM is better anyway. So if there's, I would imagine real hardware is the best hardware.
Yes.
So RAM is RAM, and you were talking about static RAM at this point, which is previously only available to the rich and famous. We can get this pretty cheap now too. So.
Well, the advantage of RAM that's on the FPGA is it's much faster. Earlier you were talking about 10 nanosecond RAM.
Okay.
And so if this Nano, if the bus speed or if the max speed of the Nano is maybe 300 megahertz or whatever, then if you use the onboard RAM, which is like noted, it's expensive but it's fast.
Yeah. Which of course the Nano does have a 32 meg SD RAM, which is that chip right there, which is on the bottom of the board.
Okay.
At this point, it's not being used in this CoCo 3 emulation. Roger is actually thinking about actually moving the video circuitry into that SD RAM.
Oh, wow.
So free up a little bit more room on the actual Nano itself to do other things.
That's just amazing. Hey, Rudy Kazuti has just joined us. Hello, Rudy. How are you? Yeah, it's neat. So I have a hard time wrapping my brain around the fact that this is virtual hardware or programmable hardware. I see it, I understand it, I know it exists, but because I don't know enough about real hardware, it's hard for me to imagine this emulated hardware. But I do know a few things about a real computer. So you typically have a processor that goes in a socket. There's usually a bus, which is circuit paths that connect that to other things, and you have other chips on your motherboard. You've got things like, chipsets and on the CoCo we had the VDG and we had a SAM and we had other things. So does this emulate all of those individual chips and all of the circuit paths or bus connections that connected all those individual chips, or does it somehow through osmosis and sorcery combine it into one super chip that just does it all? Or
No, actually, it is individualized inside the FPGA. There's the 6809. Plus there's two 6821s, which is straight out of a CoCo 3, plus the Gimme chip itself, with mods, of course, and then the external connections for two RS-232s, which the RS-232 controllers are built into the FPGA, but the actual connections on the other side of the RS-232 are right now currently being used by the Wi-Fi module and the Bluetooth module.
Yeah, and so let me ask you, how does that factor in? Because Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are technologies that didn't exist in a CoCo. You're attaching physical doohickeys for them. So when you have this Wi-Fi module, it has its own way to handle the Ethernet stack and the IP stack, and that doesn't involve more coding and processing on the Nano, or
yes.
Does it?
Yeah. In this particular case, Roger is actually for the Wi-Fi module using the ESP8266, which is a very common module that has full Wi-Fi connection, but it also has built into it an actual RS-232 interface, so you actually can connect it to any computer that has an RS-232 interface. It actually has an AT command set that actually replaces the old Hayes modem ATDT command, but instead of typing a phone number, you type in an IP address or a web address, and you could even add separate ports on it, so you can actually do UDP, TCP, the whole Telnet, FTP, the whole 9 yards.
That's what the CoCo crew were talking about, ordering one of these things, and Neil says I'm still on the waiting list to get mine. So it sounds like that's what they've been talking about, huh?
Actually, what the product they were talking about on the actual CoCo crew podcast is using this 8266 chip.
Okay. So it's this,
but it actually has the extra little pieces of hardware to actually do the level shifting for the TTL circuit.
So how do we zoom out right now? We zoom out from the CoCo hardware.
Okay.
Not talking about that. I'm talking about metaphorically. I'm trying to mentally zoom back right now. So right now you've got a CoCo hardware running on this Nano chip, but we're also talking about Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. How do we get the Wi-Fi to connect to something else? Do you have to do something on your modern PC to program the Wi-Fi to connect to your hotspot and give it the username and password to get it on, or something like that?
No, you don't, actually.
Okay.
No, actually, you don't. And here, I'll just get that started up here.
And then Curtis also has a request to show off the 80 by 60 text screen running Nitrous 9 just to bug Nick.
Yeah, that's coming. That's coming.
Okay, so you can actually do it from within the CoCo. It's an internally. Okay. See, this is also things that's hard for me to wrap my brain around, because I'm thinking in the linear physical terms of what we could do in the 80s, and it's hard for me to fathom telling a CoCo, hey, connect to Wi-Fi. Where's Siri? Hey, Siri, connect CoCo to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, well, think of the 8266 as or the ESP as a modem. Since it's got the AT command set. So that's all it is you just give it the commands and
as you
dial
can see
away.
there,
You just need your comm software.
Yeah,
That part I
mean,
understand.
ultimate
I understand RS-232, but I'm having a hard time connecting the fact that it's talking over Ethernet to your physical network. I'm not sure how those dots connect when you have to connect Wi-Fi to a SID with a password and stuff like that. So.
Well, just think of it as instead of thinking about the ESP as a thing, think about it as a serial connection to a little PC.
Okay.
Right? Because that's what the ESP8266 is. It's a little microcontroller with a Wi-Fi chip and an onboard TCP/IP stack and all that, right? So really, you could plug an ESP8266 into an RS-232 pack on a real CoCo. There's nothing particularly special there. The only question I have is, for the CoCo, on a chip, the Nano DE and everything. When you're using the RS-232 port, it has Roger's code, it set up a level higher than the RS-232 port. So, like, if I wanted to connect to a Wi-Fi to another computer, can I use another computer's keyboard to emulate the CoCo's keyboard, or does it send data out to some sort of, can I send out data via TCP/IP to go to another machine to show up the graphics? Or is it just you can connect to an RS-232 environment that looks like a Hayes modem, but it's really Ethernet?
Yeah,
what's the level of?
It's actually the latter, where you actually have that AT command set once you actually connect to any of up to 4 ports at the same time, and then you basically have to have software that will actually interact with those separate channels to do whatever you want. So you basically have 4 ports that you can actually have open live, that you actually the data itself that comes from the Wi-Fi gets pumped out on those 4 channels.
Okay.
And that's bidirectional, of course.
Right. So Steve, does that help you by thinking about it not in terms of a small module, but in terms of thinking just like it's another computer connected to an RS-232 port?
Yeah, the only thing I'm not clear on is what do you do to actually get your CoCo to connect to your Wi-Fi? What's that process?
Oh, so
okay,
what you do...
Not familiar with the AT command set offhand. I've got a manual in another room that actually I haven't played with it too much. But I actually have had it connected to Google.com.
Yeah, but how did you get it on your Wi-Fi? Take a step back from Google.
Yeah. There is actually an AT command set. I believe it's AT KIP.
So it's again through serial, you would basically you would send a bunch of AT commands to the Wi-Fi module saying, basically AT connect to SID, Bill's Wi-Fi,
Correct.
AT password equals
Correct.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I couldn't connect
exactly
in my
it.
mind. Okay,
Yep.
I got you. I'm with you.
I'm
slow, but I'm steady.
I can't remember the commands off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's where I was trying to connect the dots because I was thinking that maybe you needed to use your PC to program the wireless module and give it that information so it happens on the back end and then it translates to the CoCo. But it's all initiated from the CoCo.
Yes.
So another dumb question: could this be connected to the real CoCo? And I guess that's what the CoCo Crew podcast is talking about right now. So if you plug this board in like an RS-232 pack, you would just AT/DT your way to your home router. Once you're on your router, you can then telnet to things via IP address or hostname.
That's what that Wi-Fi 232 thing that they were talking about the other day. That's exactly what it is.
It's all come in. It's all gelled in my mind. Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's just it. People do need to understand this and
Yes.
know how to actually work with it.
I'm the measuring stick for all things. When I understand it, any idiot can understand it. So I'm just doing a public service. Because I am the above average idiot here. So. Now that's cool. So Wi-Fi capability, and so what's the Bluetooth side of things for? Just a different way to connect to your network or pair to a PC?
Yeah. It's actually used for pairing to a PC.
And that becomes the
Rogers
RS-232 conduit or Ethernet replacement, I guess? Or
Yeah. Rogers actually got that CoCoNet server software that's basically the same as DriveWire. But only DriveWire is actually still a wired connection, whereas CoCoNet is actually a Bluetooth connection for wireless.
Neat. What are the odds of doing things like Bluetooth keyboards and mice and having those become input devices back to the Nano?
It is possible. It is possible. But actually, Roger's taken one step further. He's actually added an IR receiver, which is that piece right there.
Okay.
Which will use actual infrared keyboards, joysticks, etc.
Which aren't the best, but it's still kind of cool.
No, they aren't the best, but
Yeah.
it's still he has that capability.
That's
there.
cool. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, because as soon as I hear Bluetooth, I'm like, all right, beam me up, Scotty. Let me pair all my Mac peripherals to this, and I've got a Magic Pad and a keyboard and stuff, and let me bang away on those. Wish in one hand.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Steve, it is possible, but in the keyboard sense and joystick sense, you would actually need a driver of some sort that will actually interpret that information and deal with it.
Right, and I imagine you know we talked about this a little bit last night. There's a finite amount of resources you can squeeze into this board. So you got to pick your battles, and there's still limitations, just like any other system. Every system has limits, and you still have to find efficiencies and optimizations within those limits to balance out the whole thing, I would imagine. Yes, so let's make Curtis happy, and let's show off the. And if you ever get back to it, if you could try Sockmaster's Boink at 7 megahertz, we want to try that again, and then also OS 9 at 80 by 60.
Okay, well, right now
And run games.
And run games.
There's
There's Nick.
Okay, so now I'm actually dropped back down to straight RS-DOS, and I'm about to actually boot OS 9. Rogers has an actual command in place for enhancement to DOS command, or instead of just typing DOS straight, you can actually add the image name, which in this case I have as OS 9.
Okay, DOS OS 9. 1.21 gigawatts. Great Scott. And there we go.
Now, this, of course, is running at the full 7 megahertz.
Okay. So this is truly Nitrous 9 at this point.
This is true Nitrous 9, yes.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Yeah, this is also, of course, running the full 80 by 60. So
okay, yes, look at that. Look at that glorious multi-column display there. That's great.
Now, this is, of course, one enhancement that I did to Nitrous 9 for the Nano, is I enabled all the extra text modes for all the different resolutions. It can go all the way up to 80 by 60, right back down to the 32 by 16.
Okay.
And I'm also rewriting GraphDrift now, because it's going to require a full rewrite to actually take all the extra modes that are in there as well.
Okay.
So that's kind of still a work in progress, but hopefully in the next couple of months I'll have a release for that one.
That is cool. The future of OS 9 on the Nano.
Yeah, so I'll just set this to the side here so I can actually use the keyboard.
Right. When we were talking about OS 9 last week, you know, I'm really new to it, obviously. And to me, the only way I can fully appreciate what OS 9 does is on hardware. Because when you're running it on VCC, to me, it just doesn't have the same charm, because it's easy to forget the fact that this was designed to run on hardware at a time when multitasking, multi-user just wasn't being done in the 8-bit home computer sector. So when you run it on a CoCo, it's more impressive, and then when you're running it on this new breed CoCo that's running faster, it's even more impressive, you know?
Yes. I'll just quickly changing into a directory here.
And then hopefully we can touch on this too, and if Jim's still awake, hope I haven't put him to sleep yet. But when we start talking about some of Jim's hardware projects and fragmentation and things, you know, we've already addressed the fragmentation of CoCo audio hardware. There's a little bit of fragmentation now in these CoCo projects between the FPGA and this, and you know, it's probably different camps and different, you know, schools of thought, and which one is each person's favorite.
Yes.
Are there like rivalries between these two platforms?
Actually, no. I've actually worked hand in hand basically with Bill Pierce to see what the differences he's got on their product and what we've got, and kind of collaborated and saying, well, let's kind of balance this.
Sure. Now, obviously, because they're different engineers and people working on some of the technologies, some of these enhancements that Roger has done for the Gimme would not necessarily be the same enhancements that Gary Becker's done. So if you're rewriting your graphics driver, it's not going to be a plug-and-play solution for the other FPGA system, right?
Yeah. Now, of course, there is going to be still differences because some of Gary's techniques are done a little bit differently. Like, for instance, on the extended video modes that they have, Gary has a single port or register or an address that you basically poke into, and it will dump that information to the actual graphics screen. Now, it's more of a kind of like a bit banger on the VGA.
Okay.
And I don't know. I can't say how good it is or how bad it is because I don't have one to actually try and play with. But I'm sure it's just as good as getting the actual screen dumps done at a decent speed.
Okay. But yeah, so I hear these terms a lot. I hear FPGA, I hear the term microcontroller, I hear the term Arduino, I don't know what, so I hear these terms being thrown around by people who know what they're talking about. I don't fully grasp them, but any of these things here are basically software programmable hardware doohickey, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah.
Which is just, it's so hard to wrap my brain around it. It's just, it's amazing that we can have reprogrammable hardware,
Oh, it blew my mind when I found out these things were even around.
Yeah.
Because I'm used to the old, PAL chips themselves, which are basically where FPGAs came from. Because a PAL chip, you can actually program to set certain switches, basically. So if something X happens, do Y.
Right. What is your thing? Is it waiting on you, or are you waiting on us, or is it just that's just the 80 by 60 screen that's right
that's
there?
That's just the 80 by 60, and actually
Okay.
I just figured I'd pull up a program called Scred, which is a standard OS 9 utility with a development pack.
Okay.
But it just shows that the actual Scred program itself will actually adjust itself to the screen size.
And that's a full screen editor?
Yes.
Hey, Fedor's here. Hello, Fedor. How are you?
I'll just back out of that.
You don't have any music playing in the background while you screen edit?
No, I'm still working on the actual sound player in OS 9 yet.
Yeah. That's cool stuff. Yeah, and if we could definitely try to run Boink at 7 megahertz, that should be interesting to see if it doesn't make our eyes vortex into the back of our skulls.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, I like the 80 by 60. It reminds me back in the old days with my first PC doing 160 by 53.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, actually, since I did the 80 by 60 on the Nano, anything I do develop on the CoCo now, I do on the Nano because of that 80 by 60 screen
Just
for editing.
more real estate, yeah. Now, is this the same one where Alan Huffman was showing us pictures that you guys have simulated things like scan lines and things like that on the display as well?
Actually, I'm not sure what Alan has there. I've never seen it, actually, so I can't comment on it.
Okay. I remember him posting some pictures to Facebook showing how he was running one of these platforms. And what is Alan running? Is he running this, or is he running Gary Becker's?
No, he's actually running Roger's version. I believe he also has Gary's version as well, but I'm not positive.
Okay. Yeah, I remember him posting some pictures where he got, these screen modes to look like they were on a CRT. Even though they were on a digital flat panel VGA screen, he somehow got scan lines to. Grant Leedy says, "Didn't I read earlier in the week that Nick was going to make a game or something with OS 9?" And Curtis says, "Yes, Nick is going to port Tic Tac Toe, I believe." Multiplayer tic-tac-toe. So
Keep waiting.
Nick's got his work cut out for him.
I can't wait for the blog.
yeah, and by the way, Nick, I know I commented on it, but since you're here, I really appreciated reading your recent blog post about audio and some of the challenges and decisions that you're going through with that.
Just a question on this Nano. Any idea how many have been sold so far? Like, how big's the market at the moment?
I do know of 5 sets of boards being bought, which of course would actually be work out to 25 boards. I know I've done 2 runs of boards already, and I've sold the ones that I don't have. This particular one that I have right now is still the original development version from Roger himself, which has these extra header pins on the top side of the board, which most people will not have. The reason why those ones are there is was for actually testing new pieces of hardware being added. Which right now, of course, all of those pins are actually used for other things right now, but there is still one extra I/O header available here yet that is unused, and that is that guy right there. It's a standard 8-pin input-output port that's available for control of what you want to add to it yourself.
Is that where the planned joystick is going to go?
No, Nick. Actually, the joysticks are actually planned to go onto the analog side of the Nano, which is on the bottom here, which is that header right there. Right by my finger there. There's another header there, which is an extra header on the actual Nano that is all analog to digital pins themselves.
So that's going to be another board, is it?
Yes, it is. And actually, Roger just sent me a message this morning that he's actually got a surface mount board that he's actually going to work with here that actually will finally bring the joystick board.
And what are those ports going to be? Are they going to connect to the traditional 6-pin DIN female that's on
Yes.
the original CoCo?
Yes.
So-
You can actually use the original joysticks on this new board
Okay.
that's coming.
And then will you support either hardware or emulated high-resolution support for that?
Actually, that is already in place.
Okay.
Roger actually has both high-res interfaces built into the Nano already, and it is fully auto-sensing between the two. So
That's
it knows
clever.
exactly which one to use over the other.
What is Roger's background? Now, he just decided to basically bend the rules of time, space, and physics and create all this crap.
Yeah. Well, I'm not exactly sure of his entire background, but I know he's just one of the most phenomenal hardware engineers that I've ever run into.
Wow.
The guy is just lickety-split on programming because every time I've reported a bug to him, within 10 minutes I've had an update to fix it.
Right. So basically, this requires the understanding of real electronics and circuits and components, and then it also requires, to a degree, an understanding of programming, because then you then have to write the software to create all the electronical hardware that would have been done traditionally with a bunch of physical chips and copper connections and whatnot, right?
Yeah, and I do also know that Roger's done a lot of CoCo programming. For CoCo 3, he's got a Jules game. He's also done the Phoenix IDE for the PC, which is an actual development environment on a PC to actually program a CoCo.
Okay, yeah, because when I hear IDE, I'm either thinking of hard drives or development environments. So thank you for clarifying. Cool stuff. So are we able to try Boink?
Well, I haven't actually done the code change.
Oh,
because that
okay.
actually that's I'd have to embed an extra poke in there.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe we'll have we seen enough, or is there more you need to say? Have I not asked you something, or have you not shown us something you had planned on? Because as Jim was saying, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Just curious about how do you change the CPU speed? Can't you just change the speed and just load current programs straight off, or?
Changing the speed, Nick, is actually a register change. I have to actually do a couple of anding and oring, because the register itself, one half of it, which is 4 bits, will control the CPU speed. The other half, the bottom 4 bits, controls the memory. So you gotta balance that out between what memory you have and what speed you want to run to make it work.
So if you have a basic program under RS-DOS and you want it to run faster, how do you switch
It's actually
to the
it's actually a poke.
So can you do the poke straight off?
Yeah.
And
Here, let me try to see pull it up here real quick.
Yeah, and Sockmaster's asking a similar question in the chat. Can you just do a 7 megahertz poke and let it stay at 7 megahertz?
yeah.
Give me a minute here. I'm just pulling up my...
You would be able to until you shut the thing off or reset it.
Yeah, because RS-DOS has a nasty behavior of actually changing back to a normal speed.
All right, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to run a commercial here for a minute. I'm going to take a restroom break, and I'm going to run a commercial on the live stream for those to see while you're working on that. So everybody take a minute to pause for the cause, and we'll be back. For those of you who are watching, if you need to go tinkle or whatever, feel free. You don't need my permission. There's no hall pass required. And as Chuck Woolery used to say, we'll be back in 2 and 2.
Hi, I'm John Linville.
And I'm Neil Blanchard.
And we are the CoCo crew. We are here at the last day of CoCo Fest.
It's been crazy. We are exhausted.
It's been a great weekend, one of the best CoCo Fests I can remember. I wish you could have been here. And all you have to do is make the decision and come next year.
Always come next year.
But in the meantime, listen every month to the CoCo Crew podcast.
Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me. It's Original Gamer Stevie Stroh. And I just want to let you know that I have merchandise available at my website right down here called ogsteviestroh.com. What kind of merchandise do I have? Well, you can get yourself a DVD kind of like this. This here's my DVD from 2016. This is the CoCo Fest 25th anniversary color computer gaming DVD. What else can you get on that website? Well, you can get yourself a DVD like this. This here's my brand new DVD for 2017. This is my CoCo Fest 26th anniversary DVD featuring 13 gameplay videos and over 3 hours of, or at least maybe 2 hours of, gameplay goodness. Well, for a limited time anyways, too, you can get yourself the 2017 version of Popstar Pilot on my website by going to ogsteviestroh.com. And this is the new edition that will be available for sale this year at CoCo Fest in April of 2017. You can get yourself one of these here, right here, too, from my website, ogsteviestroh.com. And you can also get yourself a really cool retro swag shirt like this that says Original Gamer. You can get the insert coin logo. You can get the I'm a Coco Nut. You can get some Atari 2600. You can get all kinds of retro images on a t-shirt or a coffee mug. It's all good stuff, and it's great merchandise, and I'd really appreciate it if you go to my website right here, ogsteviestroh.com. Click on the link for merchandise. Check out what we got. Get yourself some today. All right, people.
Between 1977 and 1994, Tandy and Radio Shack produced a wide array of prolific personal and business computers. Chances are you've used one. And now there's a new event designed to celebrate all of these computers in one place. Introducing Tandy Assembly. Come see your favorite computers, or maybe some that you missed. October 7th and 8th in Ohio's first capital city, Chillicothe. See presentations by TRS-80 creator Don French. Creator of Dogstar Adventure, Lance Miklas. And Scott Adams of Adventure International. For details, visit our webpage at www.tandyassembly.com. Some assembly is required.
They're interesting.
All right, guys. Sorry about that. I'm back. Is this thing on? Mark is asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it loses
I
it
see
at high
that
speed, doesn't it?
Sockmaster's actually got a few other techniques. Yeah, there's some techniques in there that John's using that's definitely been affected by 7 megahertz.
Okay. So, yeah, it looks like I'm seeing many balls on the field right now.
Space and time is warped.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
We've now gone from one ball
Well,
to.
It's a good thing that. Yeah, it's a good thing we tried this because now I know.
Sockmaster says Boink isn't going to look normal at 7 megahertz at any case, but I'm not buying everyone a Coke if it does. So there you go.
Well, it doesn't, John.
It runs faster. We'll give it that, right?
You just going back to what we were saying before. Can you do a poke so that basic
fast for 10 routines.
so basic runs at 7 megahertz?
Bill, did you hear that?
I'm sure there is a place somewhere in the basic ROM. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I'm sure there's some place in the basic ROM that you can actually do a poke that will change it permanently. But I'm not familiar with basic source code enough to actually know what to change.
But surely if
But
you
I'm
just
sure
do
it's possible.
I would have thought if you do the poke now, where you've got the screen now, switch the FPGA hardware to high clock, and then everything runs at the higher speed.
But basically, a poke has to address a location in memory that was known to the CoCo Basic at that time. You'd almost have to remap a memory location to hit the new register on the Nano board, right?
Yes.
So like how we have like our 64595 and 97s, maybe do like a 98 and 99 and turn that on and off or something.
Now, in this case, now in this case on the screen you see the poke that I have there right now.
Mhm.
That is the staggered poke, and it actually does speed up the code. But
Okay.
of course, things are gonna really go wonky on some of the programs because they're going to be a lot faster.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all
You
right.
can see how fast the cursor is blinking now.
Right.
So now you can run a basic program at 7 megahertz.
It's almost like having a semi-language speed at that point.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, yeah. 'Cause, like Roger was using the standard FFT9 to actually flip into the actual 7 megahertz, but he found that basic on any prompt where he comes back to the OK prompt would actually stop. So you move the register into another location so that it became permanent once you poke it in.
So if you do a dir now, how does it scroll nice and fast?
Yeah, you can't even see it. You can't even keep up with it.
Oh yes.
And that does,
Like,
unlike a
there
real
is,
CoCo,
yeah.
like in a real CoCo, you couldn't even access the disk drive in the high-speed mode,
Yeah.
right? Because it messed with the controller.
No, the FDC is
Yes,
fine
that is true.
on a real
Yeah, the
CoCo
SDC's
and
okay.
high
This,
speed.
the controller.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, the SDC is fine.
Oh,
It's
but
the
I
old
thought
floppy controllers. I think it was the first.
It's
The
the
first
sound speech cartridge that
controller,
had
I
issues.
believe, did not like the high speed.
So you have to do the poke before you run the program. Is that right? Or any program?
In this case, I think we great, and it'll stay in this mode until I either change it to another speed or power down.
Right.
that's pretty cool though.
I have Gary Becker's FPGA, and it has a switch to jump between normal speed and the 25 megahertz. You can switch that at any point. It seems to work fine.
And that was one of the
Yes.
questions. Why is one of them running at 25 megahertz, and why is this one running at 7 megahertz?
Well, that goes back to the actual RAM chips that are being used.
Ah, okay. Maybe you
like
already
on,
addressed that, and I forgot. Okay.
Ed Snyder did a daughter board for Gary.
Okay. So if
That's
you had
the
faster
only reason
RAM,
why Rogers runs at 7 megahertz, whereas Gary's runs the full 25.
okay. So it's the RAM. The RAM is
If
the
I had
limiting
faster
effect
RAM
then.
chips that I could plug into this daughter board,
And is that a user
Yes.
user decision, or somebody wanted to pony up for a faster RAM? They could have a
just
faster.
the
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Have we beat this to death, or is
well,
there
the
more to
only
talk
reason
about?
Why Roger went with these particular chips is because they're cheap.
Mm-hmm.
I think we might have beaten it to death, probably, because I'm sure
Okay.
people are gonna come up with other questions in the future.
Yeah, no, this is good. This was good. I mean, I enjoyed seeing this because I find this fascinating. I think it was a good topic in the thread to get 55 some odd people chiming in on this. Obviously, it's something of both interest, and there are people with some knowledge, both good knowledge and curiosities about this. We were starting to get a little bit of lag from you, Bill, on your audio, but no, that's good. And thanks for doing that, and thanks for being part of this project and just helping to carry the CoCo forward into the future. I know right now it is kind of a DIY, but is there ever a plan for this to be kind of a turnkey thing where somebody will provision these and somebody can just buy a ready-to-run kit? Somebody like me, I wouldn't mind paying for the time and energy it would take to solder and assemble and make it plug and play for me.
Yeah, and well, I've actually done it myself, where I bought another set of boards just to assemble and then sell off to people that don't have the skills to actually solder up a board.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing is, of course, you would have to have the D0 Nano itself. And I'm actually still willing to do that.
Yeah.
And there are a couple other people on the group as well that are doing the same thing.
Right.
So either way, whether you're skilled or not skilled, it's available.
Is the design kind of set in stone now, where there's not going to be any more feature changes as far as daughter boards and add-on boards, where somebody wanted to buy in now and just get all the parts and create it? You could get it today and then just keep flashing the firmware as new releases come out?
That's exactly it. The actual top board itself, which is in here right now, it's in its final state.
Okay.
The only thing that has been changed from the board that I have right now to what people get in the future is this wireless module. Roger rotated 180 degrees so
Okay.
that it actually fits right into this area instead. So
Okay.
it actually fits into John Strong's case that he's designed.
What's
Right now it kind of hangs over the side. You can kind of see it there, I guess.
what wireless conformity does that do? Is it just a 2.4 gigahertz and we'll do like wireless N, or can we get like a 5 gigahertz AC out of it?
No, it's just a 2.4. Is AB or GN or G
Okay. Okay.
802.11G.
Oh, really? It's just a G, a gamma, huh? Okay. I mean, speed-wise, that's more than the CoCo needs, but as far as compatibility with your home Wi-Fi, I was just curious on what the options were. That's cool.
So
I'm sorry, Nick.
In summary,
Most routers will fall all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
In summary, you're looking at something that's going to cost around $300, and you're going to build it yourself.
That might be with the case, but if you wanted to bare parts, it's less than that.
Do it that route, yes.
Well, when you factor in postage and maybe a little power adapter and a keyboard and a case, yeah. So it's a $300 do-it-yourself kit.
Yeah. Well, in pretty much. By the time you all said and done,
that's everything. To have a full set up, it'll bump up to around 300.
Mm-hmm. And there's really not too many ways to cut that cost, because this is what it costs to buy these parts in the open market, and unless somebody was going to do like a high order production run of these things, there's not too many ways to get any economy of scale on these things, right?
Yeah. Well, the one initial fallback is the actual daughter board itself. The top board on that Roger designed is actually a 4-layer, so it actually costs a little higher to actually factor in an extra cost. Whereas if it was just a straight 2-layer board, it would have been a much bigger board, but it would have been cheaper.
John Linville, I see, has made a very good comment just in the chat there.
Mm-hmm.
Why doesn't some FPGA champion get a CoCo design running on something in a more consumer-friendly package like the Mist? That was something I raised a long time ago before even Roger started this. The Mist already has a single board FPGA environment already set up. All it needs is the software to write it. It's a nice little board. It costs around the same amount, maybe a bit less now. I don't know, but it's a good comment there by John.
Oh, actually, it's a very valid comment from John. They want the reason this is done this way is because the DE0 is an actual development board for an FPGA, so it's actually just a straight attachment on. But if you actually were to take the FPGA by itself as a chip, design a board, and lay it out that way, well, for sure, it'd be the exact same thing.
Right.
But a much cheaper cost.
Oh, there we go. John says the Mist costs $200 US.
Then here we go. We're going to further fragment this already barely existing market.
Well, that was an idea I had raised years ago before all these FPGAs had come out, but then the fragmentation came in.
All right. Right. Well, it's somebody's project, so it's going to be done the way they did their project, But yeah, always good questions, All right, so we beat this one to death, Bill.
Thinking Bill's having some bandwidth issues.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah, it's the Canadian rate of exchange on bandwidth there, I think, is causing part of the delay. All right, so Jim Brain, whenever you're ready, we can switch over and talk about you. And it's nice that John's here too, John Linville of the CoCo Crew podcast, because it was a great podcast and it was great hearing your segment. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of the stuff that we can visualize some of the things that you do.
No, that's fine. I'm ready.
Okay, so we're gonna switch to you. Where did you go? Here you go. All right, so I have Jim Brain on maximize screen right now, and wow, what are we looking at?
This is the CoCo Flash.
Okay.
So, obviously, I think to follow on from a conversation we have, these units here use a similar technology to the CoCo Nano or Cyclone or whatever it is that we're going to end up calling it. But one of the things that makes it easier to make hardware for the classic computer platform is a smaller version of what is being talked about earlier, the FPGA. They're called CPLDs, complex programmable logic devices, and they're similar to FPGAs. They use the same language to develop in them, but they have they're not as big, they're not as expensive, so they don't do quite as much. But they do. They are a significant savings over having to put discrete TTL chips in a package and try to put a project together and keep the cost down. So I think that's the primary thing here is classic computers. It's a nice forum, the CoCo platform and whatnot, but people want to use discretionary cash to buy products for peripherals for their units. So it's a little bit more difficult to justify $300, $400, especially if you're not getting a whole computer out of it. If you're just getting a RS-232 cartridge or a flash cartridge or a game cartridge or whatever, that's too much money and people won't buy that. And so one of the things CPLDs will allow us to do is to build that cartridge at a cheaper rate so that it can be more cost effective. So this is CoCo Flash. It's something I'm offering for the Color Computer platform. It's an 8 meg flash cartridge, and this one is a production unit. I've got some development units. Steve and I talked earlier about kind of piggybacking on the conversation that was in the CoCo Crew podcast about what it takes to develop a solution, and so I was going to kind of show kind of what the path is from prototype to production unit. But this is a production unit right here. So I guess the question I have is what kind of questions are there? And I can start answering questions both about how to build this unit as well as kind of the other products that I have. I know I've got some sitting here on the table here that I'll show in due time.
Well, I'll ask the question in just a second, but I do also want to say I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants to see your 2 meg gimme product. But
Fair enough.
So this is a flash cartridge, and I by hearing Barry Nelson talk about this in the past, it's somewhat similar to a CoCo SDC, and where you can get a lot of things on it, but the way you handle it is differently because it's not disk images. You have to convert things to a binary file, and basically each area of flash memory is treated as if it was an individual EEPROM on a different cartridge. Is that
correct?
Fairly
correct.
accurate
So,
summary?
Yeah, it is. It's basically it's like a ROM cartridge. You plug it in, and you turn on the machine, and whatever it is that you wanted is either immediately there or it's just a menu away. The advantage probably over CoCo SDC is it's there's limited amount of parts on the unit. It can be you probably have more of an opportunity to buy more than one of them and put them on different computers just to have them available. The disadvantage, as you indicate, is that it's finite in space. So whereas an SD has 32 or 4 gig or 16 gig or whatever it is, this unit is much smaller and is right here on right here on the chip is the 8 megabyte of flash, and so you have 8 megabyte of flash, and that's your total sum of space on the unit. And so you just get to choose how you want to divvy up that 8 meg of flash. But some programs, and maybe it's not as common in the color computer platform, but some things work best as a cartridge as opposed to as a game that you would load from disk, especially if you have things like RoboCop, where it's designed to primarily be a cartridge-based game, and so things like RoboCop work well on here and may not work as well as a game that you'd load from a disk. But it's another option. One of the things that I think I joked in the CoCo Crew podcast, one of the things that's I think unique about this unit is these two chips right here are the only chips that do the cartridge part. All the rest of this work, all this stuff right over here, is all the Orchestra 90 capability.
Wow.
And so this is basically the Orchestra 90 capability. It takes up, I'd say, probably half the chip to do, or half the board to do the Orchestra 90 capability. But you can use this as an Orchestra 90, and you don't have to worry about these two things if you don't want to. You can just use this functionality as the Orchestra 90 work-alike, and if you want to load something on the flash, then you can, but it's not necessary. So if you're looking at Orchestra 90 cartridges online and they're going for $40 or $50, you may want to investigate something like this, because you get that plus the same functionality as an Orchestra 90 plus some additional functionality.
Okay, now if somebody wanted to test creating an EEPROM, so somebody's going to develop a game and they wanted to test the waters of what it's going to be like to run on a cartridge, would this be a good solution for that?
It would, because this particular unit right here can be programmed from the CoCo. You don't have to pop the chip out and load it into an EEPROM programmer and then get back in if it works. So from a debug, edit, test cycle, or an edit, compile, or assemble, debug kind of cycle, you can do that cycle probably quicker on this type of unit than you can if you burn an EEPROM.
Right. We have some good product names here coming in from the chat. So Rudy Kuzuti says this should be called the Brain Flash and the Brain Wave.
Yeah, that's cute. I like it.
How does this differ from Cloud9's flash cartridge? Because they have something that also does flash.
So their cartridge has, I think, 4 16K banks of flash memory. This has 512 16K banks of flash. Okay. But it also supports 32K banks of flash. So it's set up to support CoCo 3 flash images or ROM images, as well as CoCo 1 and 2 ROM images.
And does this also support the bank switching technique like some of those RoboCop things did that?
Yes, it does. It does indeed.
So again, if somebody wanted to test developing a bank switch cartridge, they could use this for that as well.
Correct. It works exactly the same way as the RoboCop cartridge, and it works the same as. I mean, it can function equivalently to the. I forget what Cloud9's product is called, but it will function similar to theirs. Now, I think Mark's product, it has some dip switches on the side or something that you select which cartridge bank you want to run when you boot the machine. This one has a menu that Barry Nelson wrote that allows you to soft select which bank you want to start in.
And his daughters.
That's right, and his daughter.
It's a family affair.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's cool. Now, again, I ask a lot of dumb questions because I know enough to be dangerous. If, like we have right now, we have cartridge solutions like what John Linville does that has an EEPROM on it, could something like John's printed circuit board be adapted to use flash storage where you didn't necessarily need to keep reburning an EEPROM, but that you could reprogram the flash contents of it through like an MPI or something?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the key there is that, what's the spirit of John's cartridge, right? So if you own John's cartridge already and you're saying, I like John's cartridge, I want to support John, so I bought his cartridge, I bought his game, but I want to set this up for my kids to play with, and I don't want to have them popping cartridges in and out all the time. I think that's a fair thing to say, okay, I'm going to take the image of John's game and I'm going to load it into CoCo Flash. and then I'm going to name it, whatever the game that you've purchased from John, and then that particular game will be one of the menu options that you can select.
No, I was actually meaning in the other way around. Like if you were to develop a cartridge using his circuit board, instead of using a ROM chip, could you use flash instead of the ROM so you could program it electronically instead of burning it through EEPROM?
Oh, okay. That's a little bit tougher. So the key is on the cartridge port of the CoCo. Tandy never. Remember, in the 80s, there was no such thing as flash memory, or if there was, it was not something that people considered to be usable for the home computer market. And so the cartridge port of the CoCo only decodes the cartridge line for reads, not for
so you couldn't write back to it through the CoCo.
Well, you can. I mean, you could, but it takes extra work to do it. Right. Basically, what you have to do is you have to say, and exactly what the CoCo Flash does, and probably other cartridges. There's, I think, Ed Snyder has a Flash kind of cartridge as well, and there's only one way to do it. And the way you do it is you say, okay, I am going to in the I/O space, in the FF4X, 5X, 6X, 7X space, I'm going to set up a bit. A register, and if I set that register to 1, it says, hey, if I write anything to the cartridge address locations, I want you to actually write that to the flash cartridge ROM. I want you to write it to the flash ROM. The reason you can't do that normally is because the flash ROM, it sits into the same space as RAM, right? And so the cartridge doesn't know whether you've banked RAM in or you've banked the cartridge into the address space. And so basically you have to cheat, and you have to tell the cartridge, I did this in the gimme, I banked, or I did this in the SAM or whatever, I banked the cartridge in, and I'm going to tell you that I've banked the cartridge in, and then when I write to this specific place, you can assume that I'm trying to write to the flash ROM. So go ahead and send that write onto the flash ROM.
Mm-hmm. And I think John's answered some of the questions too. John says, my current ROM cartridge circuits don't decode writes to ROM space, so you couldn't just swap the EEPROM with a pin-compatible flash chip. Okay. Yep. So, yeah, I was just trying to think of, because I think that's the one thing that has been brought up too. I think like even Nick Morentis or somebody else was saying, like if I was going to put something on a cartridge, and what happens if we want to make changes to it? Where if it's a disk image, you can roll out the updated disk image, but if it's on ROM, it's not easy for the average consumer to update the ROM, but if it was flash, then theoretically it could be done.
Well, and the nice thing is, with a cartridge that is flash ROM, not this big a flash ROM, but let's say that Nick writes a game and it's 512K. Well, 512K is a size this big right here. And so that's not too big, and you can buy a 512K flash ROM for maybe 50 cents, right? And so if you put a really small CPLD on it, you can write the logic in the CPLD that says, okay, I want to be able to write to this flash cartridge, and I still want to make an economical PC. I think Nick's, he can for himself, but in conversations with Nick, I think his concern, he wants to make it easy as possible for him to distribute his product to as many people as possible. And so discs and disk images are a little easier for him to distribute. And I'll be honest with you, burning a disk, or not burning, but writing a disk is cheaper. It doesn't require as much upfront costs as making a cartridge like this, right? Making a cartridge like this, even if you go down to a cartridge. So this isn't a CoCo cartridge, but it's got the same idea, right? All through hole, and it's forget this thing here, but you got just through hole, and maybe you got this big area right here, and you put a flash, or not flash, but a regular EEPROM there. John can probably have 100 of these boards made for $2-3 a board, but that's still $200, $300 or whatever, whereas Nick can buy a batch of new old stock discs for what? He can buy them in packs of 10 for maybe $10 a lot, and he's got less upfront cash that he has to put out in order to build a cartridge or to deliver a game.
Yeah, I just think there's obviously some benefits to having a reprogrammable medium versus the read only. But the application and the implementation, I guess, as John Linville would say, your mileage may vary. So
That's right. That's right.
That's cool stuff, though. How long has that product been around in the community, the CoCo Flash?
I got it into circulation, I believe it was at the end of the year, last year. So just basically 2017. It's been on the market since early 2017.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
very cool.
So-
cool
And I
stuff.
have to say, I like mine.
well, I'm a satisfied customer. That's great. Awesome.
Yeah, I liked hearing your philosophy on customer satisfaction. That you want people to trust you and your products and your service and things like that. And so that kind of commitment to quality and satisfaction are some kind of old school values too. Since we're dealing with some old school technology, so it's nice to know that. Not that anybody else doesn't also follow that mantra, but it's just kind of nice to hear you say it.
hmm Well, I'd be surprised. I mean, like I said, I've been offering things for sale since 2004. So it'll be 13 years. This year will be this is my 13th year of being in business, and there are a lot of people who I don't advertise, but they like, hey, you really need to start your journey by checking out Jim's product line and whatnot, as opposed to going piecemealing it through eBay or whatever. And there are people that sell stuff cheaper than you can, than I can sell it at. But a lot of those folks who don't, who try to sell things a lot cheaper, they end up not sticking around, or they don't add in any kind of margin into their product line to support things that might happen.
Right. So this is something anybody can order now. Do you have an inventory of this right now? If somebody wanted to order some that you could fulfill, or do you need a lead time to get some of these ready?
No, I have all the products I sell. As I indicated in the podcast, I don't hand solder. I know Ed's got some videos where he shows hand soldering and whatnot, and that's great. But I don't have the capability to do that and do other things. So I went ahead and I professionally have my stuff professionally assembled. And so as part of professionally assembling, it's cheapest, or not cheapest, but it doesn't become economical to do things unless you do 100 units.
Okay.
So anyway, I have stock of most everything here because I buy them in 100-unit batches, and right now I've probably got, I don't know, I've got plenty of stock of the CoCo Flash units left. I think I've sold probably, seems like I've sold maybe half my first lot, so I've got some ready to go and available.
So is go4retro.com, is that where people should go to see this?
Yep, goforretro.com.
I'll switch over to that for just a second. So here's your website. So Retro Innovations, which is go4retro.com, and I also have this in the description of this video. So here's a picture of you, and from your homepage, where do we go to click on Buy It Now type stuff? Hardware design or products in action?
Up at the top, there should be a thing that says store.
Online
way up.
store.
There
Online
you
store.
go.
Find it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, no, right up at the top. In there, say something right up.
Online store. Here we go.
Yeah, there
Retro
you go.
Innovation. So it's store.go4retro.com. There we go.
Yep.
Okay. So here we have an expander, 3-slot cartridge expander. We've got Commodore disk cables. We've got Zoom floppies. We've got CoCo Flash. We've got IC headers, VIC-20 MIDI cartridge, Super Pet OS 9 MMU. You got all kinds of goodies here, huh?
That's right.
And that's something I learned by listening to the podcast, is that you originally started off in the Commodore world, and you're somewhat new to the CoCo world, which makes it even more impressive. So I'm going to copy and paste this into the YouTube chat as well. So it's store. www.goforretro.com if anybody wants to buy a CoCo Flash. And so originally $55, but today and today only, if you act now, only $50.
That's right.
Now, when you're selling it as just a board, so there's not a case for it.
No, I don't have. I mean, I'm trying to buy a big batch of cases. I kind of want to make. I'd kind of like to get maybe a little bit more products moving from the CoCo, spot. So I'm trying to get some more different types of products built up, because I talked to John and Boise and whatnot about buying their injection molded cases, and it looks like I need to pick up like 100 or 200 cases to kind of make it economical for me to put the cases on the unit. And so I'd like to get a couple more products in the pipeline so that people can, so I won't have to sit so long on I don't know how many dollars worth of cases it is, but you don't want to sit too long on inventory if you don't have to.
No, of course not. Yeah. And that's cool. And so is John Strong making a 3D printed case available for this if somebody wanted to order one on demand?
He does, and so
Okay.
he's got the cases available, and people can, I don't know if he's got a storefront or not, but everybody knows John, so you can hook up with John and get your 3D printed case.
Yes. No, that's cool. And so I remember Ed Snyder too put something in the Facebook group where he had to, unfortunately, drill some holes in the injection molded cases to get his ORC 90 thing to work, and he had to manually do that. So
Yep.
so I'd imagine you're gonna have the same thing here too, because you've got some buttons and LEDs, and you got your headphone jacks and stuff. So there's the cost, and then there's obviously now more labor involved in doing that too. And these are the things that people don't understand. What it takes, how long it takes to develop it and design it, and you at least mentioning, hey, I'm not gonna now hand solder because that takes a lot of time. But in any case, there's still an expense even when you outsource that. I would imagine that, like many things in the retro world, there's not a big margin, and there's probably not a huge market. There's a very finite number of potential buyers, and so your reputation is everything when it comes to these kind of things.
Right.
And you mentioned in the podcast you still have a day job, so obviously this is not this is not paying all the bills.
No.
Yeah, that's cool though. I like it. The CoCo Flash, and so it also sounds like Barry Nelson, for better or for worse, definitely influenced feature creep, much to your dismay. At sometimes it sounded like, hey, can we get the Keurig machine with this too, and the
That's right.
toaster oven? And
That's right. So right here, as you're referring to, right here is the first version of the CoCo Flash. So as I indicated, I kind of like to have not a whole lot on top. Then you can, obviously this isn't a production unit, but but if it were to go to production, then you could put some verbiage right here, or maybe some instructions or whatever you can put on the top, and then on the bottom you have all the parts. And so this is the original CoCo Flash. So you've got just a two chip solution right here. Well, then like I said, I went to put it in, and I have one of the infamous cases right here, right? So I went to put it on the case, and as you can tell, if you go to put it in, it starts to, I think you can see right there, the chip on the bottom conflicts with, this one's not so bad, but the original program packs with the sliding window or whatnot, the window wouldn't slide open. Right?
Yes. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
So that's a problem, because I know some people like to reuse cases from games that they don't like anymore, or they don't need anymore, or whatnot. So this unit was the first unit, and that was that was a non-starter, and so I had to, this was fine for Barry to get started on his code and for us to prove out the idea, but then the second version of it was this one, and so here's another option right here where I've moved the chips to the front, and then you can see that I've added I haven't populated all the pieces here, but I've added all the parts for the Orchestra 90 capability, and that was, I was driving back from Kansas City after dropping something off, and Barry called and said, "Hey, I think it would be great from game perspective, if people knew that if they wrote a cartridge game or they wrote a disc-based game, that they had some indication that it would be relatively easy for people to have access to an Orchestra 90 so that they could write the game to support Orchestra 90 capabilities. And he said, so it'd be really nice if you could add this capability on. And I stewed about it for a little bit, but, be honest with you, this particular board here, I mean, it didn't have a lot of room, and I wasn't taking full advantage of this particular chip. And so one thing you got to understand when you develop cartridges is you pay for the amount of square centimeters or square inches of board space, whether you use it for anything or not.
Sure. It's real estate.
So that's right. So it made sense to implement on here. And then, of course, that was pretty much all of it. And then you see right over here on the corner, this was this last minute addition of things where Barry was telling me about the blue-green artifacting and how you have to sometimes press the reset button all the time in order to deal with that. And so this was a circuit that I came up with to try and allow the opportunity to have two different kinds of resets. And so this is the reset line right here. And what this does is this says, if you don't hold the reset button for very long, I'm not going to actually reset this unit. So if you just tap the reset button, then it'll just reset to the same game. Whereas if you hold the line a long time, you push the reset button a long time, then I will actually reset to the menu. And so that's what that is right there.
Well, how important was that when we've got a reset button in the back of the CoCo if we just needed to fix our artifact colors? Or is it factor into needing to stay in the flash bank that we're in? If we hit reset on the CoCo, we lose that bank? Or
no, what I'm talking about in the reset button, neither one of these buttons are the reset button. The button I'm talking about is the reset button on the back of the CoCo.
Oh, it is. But that reset button is now tied in through glue to this cartridge too.
That's right.
Okay. Because when I heard you, when I was listening to this on the podcast, I'm like, well, why did we even need a reset button on the cartridge when we've got one on the computer? But now it's not a physical button; it's more of an integration of that button to this cartridge.
That's right. Because the buttons here have another function. So one of the functions that a cartridge board has to have is it has to have a way to bypass the auto start functionality, right? Because if you were to put into the ROM a bad image, so you've written a bad image to the ROM and then you reset your machine, how would you ever be able to get back to this unit to be able to reset it and put a good image in?
Okay, so that's like putting tape over one of the pins, right?
That's right. That's right. This was the way of not having to put tape over one of the pins.
That's a high-tech piece of Scotch tape right there.
Yeah, right.
Okay. That's cool.
So
that's
we
cool.
did. So now Barry also wanted a functionality. He said, I think it'd be easier. Some people may want to hold the reset button a long time, but some other people may want to just be able to quickly get back to the main menu. And so this button over here, if you hold down this button, the button on what would be the left, I guess, and you press the reset button, then it will also automatically go back to the main menu. So we have a couple different variations there. Okay. So, but that's that unit, and then of course, like I said, the production unit looks very similar to this. So here's the production unit compared to the non-production unit, and you could say they're almost identical. The only thing is, this capability of the little FET and everything that was over here, that's integrated on the bottom of the board.
Okay.
So you don't see it.
Right.
And so Ed Snyder's version of this board has a lot of this capability rolled into the CPLD as well, but I didn't have a lot of extra I/O lines available. And as Bill had indicated, you start to run out of capabilities on these chips at some point. So I was running out of both the logic elements that are in here, plus I was running out of pins to use. So I chose to implement the Orchestra 90 the way that it's implemented, more like the way it in the actual cartridge, the original cartridge itself. Where this is just regular TTL chips right here, and these are all the resistors that you see if you open up an Orchestra 90. So that's all the same capability there. But it takes a while, and every one of those iterations, that's a board run. You heard Bill. I would, if Bill's still on, I would say, dude, we got to talk, because 3 boards for $80 is too much money. I usually pick up a batch of 10 boards for like $50. So there's a little bit cheaper places to get boards, but in any event, that's one of the things. And I think the other thing to note is that here's the advantage to a CPLD. So like you indicated, I do Commodore stuff. So this is a Commodore network card right here, and I've had this in the market for a number of years. And so it looks, like I said, there's nothing on the top, but all the important stuff is sitting here on the bottom, and it's all TTL chips and then the big chip that does the Ethernet. But if you do a CPLD, you can simplify the board considerably, because this is what the CoCo network card looks like. It's a much simpler board.
Wow.
It doesn't have nearly as much, and of course the fewer things you have to solder on the board, the cheaper it is to professionally assemble the board, because they charge so much money per pad. Okay. So
almost like writing software, when it comes to developing hardware, you want to optimize it as much as possible, and in this case, not to save cycles, but to save actual money.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and the other thing to note is on these 2 boards right here, so the CPLD gives you a lot of advantages, because this one right here offers the ability to be located in one of 4 banks in the I/O space of the Commodore. But that's your only options, is one of these 4 banks. And in order to set one of these 4 banks, you have to actually solder a jumper here, right? Whereas on this unit right here, I don't have to worry about jumpers, and where you want the network card to be located is software selectable. And so you can select any of the I/O space in the any of the I/O space in the CoCo under software control.
Are these currently available now too, the network adapters?
No, I'm waiting on. Brett Gordon's been working on some software for it, and I'm, like I said in the podcast, I think that's for Fuzzix. But really need to find a way to get some drivers into something like OS 9 or maybe RS-DOS. RS-DOS, but somewhere to put drivers that folks can use from BASIC, or maybe some quick assembly language or whatnot, as opposed to having to switch to an entirely another operating system in order to leverage this. So that's the thing I'm basically waiting on in this. I did this as a prototype because Brett really wanted to try out doing Ethernet programming, and I already had this design. So this design right here, it was easy to transfer it over and implement it for the color computer.
Now the actual bus connection right there, the cartridge slot thingy, is that something you also have to design from scratch to match up with the bus connector, or is that like a ready-made part that you can just add on to?
I had to design this one because, and let me show you another cartridge, because I noticed after I got those first cartridges done that the CoCo puts their 5-volt line, they make it shorter than the rest, so that you don't get power until all the other pins are connected on the cartridge port. I assume this is here in case somebody were to try to accidentally plug in a cartridge while the computer was on, right? So that's a little bit different right there. But the nice thing is these are standardized. So every one of these is 2.54 millimeter away from each other, or 1/10 of an inch. And so I have a library that has a part that's almost like this. So I just had to, the part I had was 44 pins, and so I just chopped it's 22 pins per side, so I just chopped 2 pins off of each end, and then that I was able to create a new part, which is the CoCo part, and then I assigned all the signals. So over here's reset and so forth. I assigned all the signal names to it, so that when you just start a design, you already know what all the chip signals mean, the address lines and data lines and so forth.
Very cool. Yeah, James Ross says that CoCo NIC card is cool too. Yeah. Man, it's still, we're talking about real hardware, and it's just like, it boggles my mind how many projects are out there and how we have people. I mean, you're a mere mortal, but you're creating things like this. And, for me growing up, you only thought of these things coming from big companies, but we have we live in a time now where people like yourself and John Linville and John Strong and Ed Snyder and stuff, you're kind of empowered where if you can think it, you can almost do it. And the ability to do it is within reach, both technologically and financially. It's just hard to come to grips with sometimes, but it's exciting, that you can imagine things and develop things and test them and then have them made,
Well, I agree. If you look out on the internet from long ago, so if you'd go on the internet and you search for Power Glove serial interface. So if you remember, Nintendo used to have a thing called the Power Glove, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was a senior in college, actually between my junior my senior year, starting the senior year and culminating as I graduated from college, I developed an interface to hook the Power Glove up to a PC or a Macintosh through a serial port. And so I went through this whole hardware effort when I was in college, but I did not know how to lay out hardware. I just knew how to write some software. The unit had a small microcontroller on it, and it had the Power Glove and a Power Glove connector. And so a lot of this stuff I had to get done professionally. And so I had a professional company lay out the board, and a board the same size as the CoCo network card board. And it was for the lady who did the design, or the lady that I contracted with. She said, I'll give you a really good rate if you let me train my nephew on how to use this CAD program during the summer do your board. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'm not in a huge hurry. So I did that. And so she cut me a deal, and it was $4,000 to do that board design.
Okay.
And then when I had a company that did the manufacturing and assembling of the units, and they were $60 a board to assemble them, and that was 100 boards at the time.
Wow. And that's
So
your cost. That's wholesale.
That's right. That was wholesale cost. And
wow.
And so, there was now luckily we had asked online, this was back before the web even existed. And so the big thing that we communicate with people was through a system called Usenet. And so there's a Usenet news group out there called Sci.virtualworlds, I believe is what it's called. And so I advertised on there and said, hey, we're thinking about building this. Is there enough market? And if I can get maybe 60 or 70 people that are interested, I will, work on building all these out. And so, but it'll have to be prepaid. And so we had people that paid us $100 a board, or $100 a unit to get the units made. And so that's what, so I had, I don't know, 75 or 80. So I had $8,000, and then I had to take that $8,000 and I had to pay for all these different things that had to be done. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, it was an extremely expensive operation in order to get this unit done. And I didn't do much of it myself. I wrote the code, but I had to have the board professionally manufactured, and I had to have the design professionally made and whatnot. When I stepped back into this role in 2004 or 2003 or whatever, now you could buy, you don't even have to buy a CAD program that will allow you to lay out print circuit boards. You can get KiCad or Eagle or I don't know, a bunch of other companies offer free or very low cost CAD solutions. And then literally you can take your design and you can send it off to, you put it on the web, you upload your zip file. And like one of the companies that I use for prototypes is a company called Elecrow, ELECROW. And you upload a design and you say, I want 10 boards, and it's $30 or something like that. And they'll do the boards and they'll ship them to you. And so by the time you're out $40 and change plus, to do the shipping, and it usually takes about 10 business days, maybe, or not 10 business days, but about 7 business days, and it'll show up, and you only paid, $50 or $60 or $40 to $60 for the boards. And then you can call up DigiKey, and if you want to assemble them yourselves, like Ed does, you call up DigiKey or get on their website and you order all the parts. They have millions of parts there, and you order them and they'll ship them directly to you. Or you can you can contract with other companies, not outside of your home. Basically, you contract with a company and you send them design for the board, and you send them a bill of materials, and in 30 business days, they'll ship you back, well, and some money, and they'll ship you back 100 finished boards, already tested, ready to go.
So there are fulfillment services that are out there.
Correct. And so that's
Right.
what I do. I found one that does a really good job, and they know me pretty well, and they even let me store some of my stock at their location. So instead of shipping the parts here and then turning around and shipping them back where the assemblies are done, I just have the parts directly shipped to the assembly house.
Okay.
And then the assembly house does the work with the parts that I ship there, and then they send the completed units to me.
Oh, wow. It's so turnkey at this point once you've designed it. You design it, you prototype it, and then you send it out for mass production.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, and then, when the sale, so I have the web store, you showed it earlier, and so people fill the orders, and then I have a program on my computer down here in the basement that downloads those orders, and I can print out mailing labels here, and then I can have what they call carrier pickup through the post office, and FedEx will come to the house as well. So I literally don't have to leave my house if I really didn't want to, and I can design, manufacture, and sell products without actually having to depart the premises.
Yeah, that's neat. These are great times.
So
these are great times. Yeah. So yeah, I would love to see that 2 meg thing again. Ever since I saw it in the newsletter, I've just been drooling. So
okay, well here it is. So let me see if I can get it back on the screen here. Give me a second. Okay, so this is CoCoMem. Here. Let me back the camera up just a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Whoops, wrong way. So this is the unit. So as you can tell right here, so underneath the unit is a special unit, and I think Ed and I are getting these from the exact same place. I think there's only 1 or 2 places that make this sort of thing, but anyway, so this is the carrier that goes where the gimme is right now.
Right.
And then the gimme sits in this socket that's right above it. Most of the pins are connected directly across. And then over here is another CPLD, and this CPLD decodes the address and data line functionalities necessary to implement the SRAM. So this uses SRAM instead of DRAM, like the 512K, the original 512K unit from Radio Shack or in the day from the competitors used DRAM.
Sure.
But like Cloud9's
Triad's now SRAM.
Triad, that's right. Triad is SRAM, and Triad does a similar thing. It has a CPLD and some RAM chips as well, but it plugs into those 2 pin header connections that are on the CoCo motherboard.
Right.
This does not. This plugs directly into where the gimme plugs in.
Okay.
So,
and then what are the pin headers that are on the top of it there?
These are just for testing. So this is how you program the CPLD. You use this programming head right here, and these are just extra pins that I had available to use for testing. So so the finished unit won't have any of that.
Okay.
Right? It won't have any of those things.
Right.
And then it won't have these items over here. It'll just be this, and the chip the carrier underneath and the voltage regulator.
Would the board get a little smaller, or is it still going to have that little extra extension off to the side there?
It's possible if I move to a 4-layer board. So I'm thinking about that. But the problem is here is you running into a problem of real estate. So if you and I can bring it over and show it on my CoCo 3 because I've got the screws out of it, and so I might just position and pivot here. But the problem is that this can't go any further out here because you've got the keyboard connector right here.
Right. Okay.
And this can't go much further up here beyond this point right here because you have the RF modulator that sits right up here.
Okay.
So you've got a little bit of space over here, but if you go over here, then if somebody has the protector. If you have the protector on here, then you start to get into the space where the protector, because I think the 6809 sits right here.
Okay.
So I guess I need to move over so that the protector sits right here, and so you can't get too far over here, or else you get into the CPU. And down here is about your only option. But I felt like I needed more room, so I went this direction as opposed because this this all empty because this is where the Triad or the 512K RAM expansion would sit.
There's
so there's nothing
there. Right.
There's nothing
Yeah,
there.
that's
so.
the area I was wondering if you could chop off where those two blank sockets are right now. Could you chop off that space just to save some PCB real estate?
Yep. This can go, and some of this can go.
Some of the header area.
Yeah.
Curtis Boyle's asking a question in the chat. He says, does he have extra room on the CPLD after doing all the 2 megabyte RAM stuff to add any extra functionality to the gimme?
And the answer is yes, I do. However,
A sound chip.
A sound chip.
Right. I mean, you could do well, and you can. I thought about that. You can put there's quite a bit of functionality left on this, because in order to, so here's a case where on this particular chip, and I don't think you can tell. I can flip over to the. Let me flip over to the scope here, but. So let me.
That's amazing too. Talking about technology now.
Yep.
The fact that we have this microscope.
Yep.
Amazing.
Let me see. It's not updating, so I'm going to try and. I don't know what the. It had it, and now it doesn't. So
I
let me
see IC3 on there. Is that not what we're looking at?
No, it's that's the CoCo Flash. So
okay.
let me check it real quick. But anyway, this unit right here is what's called a. So when talking, he was talking about logic elements in a CPLD. The discrete unit of work is called a macro cell. And so this has 288 macro cells in it, which is not a ton, but that's a good number. The CoCo Flash implements all of its functionality with 144 macro cells. But I didn't choose this 288 macro cell unit because I needed the 288 macro cells. I chose it because I needed all these I/O pins, right?
Okay.
And this was the chip that, so once you need to get to this 144 pin chip, you have to go up to 288 macro cells. So in this unit right here, I think I'm only using like a third of the chip. And so I have lots more space to do things. So there's possibility to do that. However, and I know Curtis keeps talking about this, and I think it's a great idea. My goal was not to produce this unit, right? So as we've already indicated, this is not the final form of the board anyway.
Sure.
This stuff should go away, and these things should go away, and this should be made smaller anyway. One of the things I need to do is I need to start designing with FPGAs because they offer even more opportunities. And if you're going to be pulling the gimme out of the socket and you're going to be putting something in its place, it would be, as Curtis indicates, it would be best to have as much functionality on the board that you put in the gimme slot as possible. So I was going to start by learning how to do this 2 megabyte functionality, but my next version of the board, I was hopeful to switch this out for an FPGA, which would have even more functionality, and then implement the same thing once I've got it all figured out. But then that would offer the opportunity to add, gimme functionality or lots of expanded functionality. It's the skies. There's less constraints if you move to the FPGA.
Okay, so if you're going to do FPGA, could you just replace the gimme with an FPGA gimme, kind of like what Roger Taylor is doing and Gary Becker is doing, and not even have to put the same gimme back in?
You could. I think my idea. Well, first of all, it's probably going to end up being Ed that takes this design and implements it into his super gimme. Let's say that's what's going to be called.
Yeah.
Because extra RAM is this is a really simple thing to do. Even with the extra registers and whatnot, it's a pretty simple thing to do. So I have a feeling that because this is open source, I have a feeling that what Ed and Roger will do is they'll get their gimme functionality together, and then what they'll do is they'll come over and they'll say, hey, everybody would like to have this 2 meg RAM expansion functionality in it as well, so let's go pull Jim's project and let's grab the source code for his implementation and we'll just incorporate it into our project. So I really think that's the cheapest and easiest way to do that, because he's doing all the work to get that gimme actually replaced. I think if I'm going to do another version of this board and put an FPGA here, I think I would continue to keep the gimme, even if the functionality is is completely replaced by the functionality in the FPGA. Just because if you needed to, for some reason, go back to a stock gimme functionality, then you'd still have it on board.
Okay.
The other thing is here's something that's just purely practical. In other computer environments, the people will say, "Hey, I got this replacement," and so you can take your initial chip out and you can put it off to the side, and now save it because you might want to put it back later on. So save it,
Yeah.
and you can replace it by putting my board in or whatnot. Well,
Okay,
you know
right.
what happens. You know what happens to that chip, right? People forget where it is, or they lose it, or they throw
Yeah.
it away, or whatever, right?
Right.
So I try to tape them. I try to put them in anti-static bags and tape them on the inside of the case where I took the chip out from. But most people don't do that. So I think if you implement something like this, where the chip is still got a home, then at
Yeah.
least you know if you want to take the unit back to stock, then the chip's still there. You can just pop it out, pop the board out, and put it back together.
Roger that. Cool. So Curtis asking another question, and so the role of Barry Nelson today is being played by Curtis Boyle. Is it possible to make the FPGA version of the Gimme software upgradable in the field so you could get a version working first and then send people software updates for blitters, etc.?
It's gonna be difficult to do that given how important the Gimme is to how the CoCo 3 operates, because if you think about it, the Gimme is the traffic cop in the middle of everything. RAM is not connected directly to the CPU. It's connected through the Gimme. The only path RAM has and ROM is to get through the through the Gimme to, CPU goes through the Gimme to RAM, CPU goes through the Gimme to ROM. However, one of the things that would be possible, I think, is to put like a little SD card slot or a little nano SD card on the board, and so you could download a new copy of the firmware onto that, that little nano SD card, and if you had a slot, you could slide it in there and turn on the machine. The FPGA would look at the SD card, it would see that it was present, it would see that it has a new firmware file on it, it would go and start updating itself, and then after that you would just reboot the machine.
Cool. So that's an option.
Yeah. Now what it will require is, because when the FPGA is being programmed, it has no memory, it has no knowledge at all. It's a completely dumb chip. So the way you have to do this is you have to put another chip on the board, which is, you were talking about earlier, a microcontroller. So you would put a microcontroller on the board that can reload the FPGA with new code from the SD card. So it would be a two-chip type of operation. The FPGA is there to implement the Gimme, and the microcontroller is there to read the SD card and update the Gimme.
Right. Sockmaster was saying one way to keep your chips without losing it is to use some blue sticky tack and just stick it inside the CoCo case. And then Curtis says that if you keep the original Gimme in there, that it could keep the train running while the upgrade's taking place too, having the original Gimme still in there too.
That is true, but you end up having to have that microcontroller there because the FPGAs don't know how to program themselves.
Yeah. So you still need an intermediary device of some kind.
That's right. But you can use if you want to, you can use, microcontrollers don't have to be very big at all. So, they don't have to take very much space. You've got this kind of a unit right here is a very small unit right there. So that's, you can see, let me see if I can get it over here so I can show you. Right above my finger is an entire microcontroller.
Wow.
And so, they're tiny, tiny little things.
Yeah. That's cool. It's just such an exciting technological time that we live in right now, and it's neat that all of this new tech is being used to enhance old tech in a very traditional, respectful way, where we're not abominizing the equipment,
Right.
Because that question keeps coming up. When does it stop becoming a CoCo? And so the fact that all these things are possible, it's just really exciting, and yeah, man, this is really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Curtis says, "Take my money." Yeah, and I think we also live in a time not only where the technology is better, but hopefully, since we are all a little older and hopefully a little wiser, the common sense factor of wanting to pay for these things and value these things and not pirate them and all this kind of stuff is probably a little better than when we were all kids and teenagers and stuff. Where if we haven't learned by our mistakes back then with piracy, if we don't support our community and these projects and the people making them, they just won't exist. And what's your experience with that? Obviously, you've been doing it now for a number of years, and you feel like you're getting the support from both the Commodore and the CoCo community, correct?
I do. I think people they have more discretionary cash. Obviously, there are some products that sell better than others. So things that are related to games or they are related to sound are very important, and there's a lot of uptake on those types of products. Basic products that allow people to bring their system up and kind of relive their youth, relive those early days, or show show the home computer a new generation of individuals. Those items have a lot of value, and so they get a lot of support. But I do think it's important to be realistic about the community, right? So a lot of people have said, hey, why don't you build a product that has all of these great features, and it's $150, and you slap it onto the back of your computer or your home computer, and it just does these very specific set of things that's usable or useful to a very, very small set of people. And the problem, it's a great idea for a prototype. It's a great idea to build something like that and bring it to a show, but it's problematic because even in this day and age, putting together a 100-unit run of CoCo Flash is going to be I think by the time we were done, or by the time I was done purchasing the units and getting them here, it was probably $2,300. So you can't afford to have too many of those types of solutions sitting on the shelf with people that don't want them. And like I said, that's not that having people not buy those types of products is not necessarily an issue with the community. It's an issue with the fact that you didn't build something that they were really interested in buying in the first place.
Right.
So I think you have to be rather harsh about what it is that you think the market is going to that they're going to want and they're going to be willing to buy. Some people I know, anytime something new comes out for a classic machine, they buy it, and sometimes they have no intention of using it at all. They just want to support the community, and those people are great. They're the unicorns of the community. But
the unicorns, like the Apple mentality. And then every time the Apple releases a new whatever, I gotta have it, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so they'll do that.
Yeah. I need to take another quick potty break. I don't know how much time you have left, but I would like to pick your brain a little bit on some of the discussion you had on the podcast, as well as about sound options and sound fragmentation, which also kind of ties into what Nick blogged about for a little bit. Is that cool with you? You got a little bit more time?
I do. I'm fine.
Okay, I'm going to run some more of the commercials through my XSplit so people will see something there, and I'm going to mute Skype so they won't hear you guys talking, and I'll be back in like 2 minutes again, too. And thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Okay.
I'll be right back. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me. It's Original Gamer Stevie Stroh.
Yeah!
Gameplay goodness. Gameplay goodness.
Hey!
Gameplay goodness. All right, people. Gameplay goodness. Thank you so much. There's my shark down there. There's Maggie. Gameplay goodness. Just do it. Gameplay goodness. Yeah. Just do it. Gameplay goodness.
Are you ready for this?
Gameplay goodness. Yeah. Gameplay goodness. Gameplay goodness.
This is how we like to do it.
Gameplay goodness. All right, people. Gameplay goodness. Skadoosh. And now he's shooting at me. Gameplay goodness. Gameplay goodness.
Drop it low.
Gameplay goodness. All right, people. Gameplay
At home, at the beach, in your car, at the shop, at the office, anywhere you enjoy fine audio programming. It's North America's premier source for color computer news, the CoCo Crew Podcast.
This is John Linville.
And Neil Blanchard.
And we are the CoCo Crew. I hope it's going to be a great show.
Join John and Neil each month as they bring the latest news about the color computer, Dragon, MC10, and others. It's the CoCo Crew Podcast. Visit www.cococrew.org and listen today.
You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast.
At GSoft, we make games for the TRS-80 Color Computer, TRS-80 MC10, and Dragon computers. Our basic games cover the range of genres from arcade, to text adventures, to simulations, to 3D dungeon crawls. This is our latest puzzle game from Japan, Fruit Panic. So come on and drop by our website and download our latest games.
Gonna stop fun, beat smooth, like landing a plane in Top Gun. Split you in pieces like the Triforce if you think you're cool. Wise Ghosters building in Ghostbusters on Nintendo Names. Playing Warcraft and Diablo. Why can't Hex a lot?
Is my audio working?
Crossed out an extra lot.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah, we
audio
hear
is
you.
working.
Now,
Hey, John, how are you?
Doing all right.
Before we move on to more of this hardware discussion, I do want to change gears for just a minute. And by the way, how many people have had a chance to listen to the most recent episode of the CoCo Crew Podcast?
Me.
Yeah.
I have.
The level of Miro productions this month, we've gotten more Miro per square inch than we've had in many, many months' time. And not only do we get a lot of Miro, and yes, it will catch on, but we got these Miro productions with much more members of the CoCo Crew in them as well. So it's not just a bunch of voices that sound like Mike Rowan talking, right? So I asked him to send me the files, and he sent them to me. So I thought we'd take a minute here and play some of these latest, greatest Miro productions. And there's so many. It's like, it's like trying to pick your favorite stripper at a nightclub. You just can't do it, So one of the ones that I just loved was like the CoCo Renew. So I'm going to play this for just a minute. And I think I've got system sound shared so you guys can hear it too. Let me know if you hear this.
Over time, all CoCos suffer from performance loss and increased electricity consumption. That's because even the best-made CoCos create bit plaque during computation. These plaque deposits build up on integrated circuits, causing a variety of performance problems, including increased power consumption, random resets, excessive heat, and clock skips. CoCo Renew is specially formulated to remove up to 99% of bit plaque buildup.
My Color Computer 3 was really getting hard to use. It would keep resetting right in the middle of King's Quest. Do you know how frustrating it is to lose your place in a game? I was about ready to throw away my CoCo 3 and buy a new one. But then I discovered CoCo Renew.
Cosmic rays, beta particles, and the interaction of the moon and Earth's magnetic fields only make the problem of bit plaque accumulation worse.
I tried everything. I reseated chips, I replaced caps, I even replaced the transformer. Diagnostics all passed, but my CoCo was still randomly locking up. I was getting so frustrated, I couldn't even sleep. I started to drink heavily, all because I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my CoCo. My life was beginning to spin out of control. But then life changed when I discovered CoCo Renew.
CoCo Renew's patent-pending formula not only removes bit plaque, but also protects your computer from future plaque buildup.
Since using CoCo Renew, my system is rock-steady stable.
One application of CoCo Renew, and it's like a new machine.
Find your GPS coordinates and look them up on the easy-to-use Lunar Magnetic Calendar. This will tell you which day of the month to use CoCo Renew. Then simply disconnect the transformer and the keyboard from your CoCo's motherboard. Slide it into the included Perspex tray and gently pour CoCo Renew over the motherboard until it's entirely submersed. Place the cover over the tray and leave for 24 hours. Remove the motherboard using the included tongs and gloves. Rinse the motherboard gently with a garden hose and allow to dry for 24 hours. Now place the motherboard in the included striped Mylar envelope. Seal it and place it in a dark area for 3 days. Gently remove the motherboard from the envelope and scrub with denatured alcohol using the included brush. Gently rinse the motherboard with a garden hose and allow to dry for 24 hours. Now find the Julian date on the lunar magnetic calendar to find the best time of day to reinstall the motherboard. Reconnect the keyboard and transformer. That's all there is to it. Now your CoCo will perform like new.
No more resets. No more lost games.
No lockups, it runs cooler, and I've started to attend AA meetings.
Don't throw away your color computer. Renew it with CoCo Renew.
Thanks, CoCo Renew.
And coming soon, CoCo Renew PAL, Dragon Renew, and MC10 Renew.
Persons using this product assume responsibility for its use in accordance with current directions of the manufacturer. CoCo Renew makes no representations or warranties of any kind, either express or implied, regarding this information or the product to which this information refers. CoCo Renew contains leprechaun plasma derivatives and polyisobutylene. Women who are pregnant or may become pregnant should not be exposed to CoCo Renew. Do not drink or ingest CoCo Renew. Read all warnings and product information before using CoCo Renew. Drinking problem? Visit www.aa.org.
That is just too good. Mike has outdone himself. Myro is the man. Good stuff, and there's so many of them, and I just thought I would play at least one of those. Good stuff, good stuff. So something else you talked about in the latest episode of the CoCo Crew podcast, which, by the way, can be listened to by going to cococrew.org, is the whole idea of the different sound projects and products that are out there, kind of sound fragmentation, if you will. And I know Nick kind of touched on this too in his most recent blog about Gunstar, is that, you know, sometimes too many choices is almost a bad thing. And when you talk about the market, how many people are there? What do these people want? How many are at what, you know, what's the maximum base sale amount you think you're ever going to have? So again, the exciting times sometimes can create confusion in this marketplace. So John Linville has his Game Master cartridge, which I think is a perfect fit for somebody who's going to develop a ROM cartridge where the sound and the ROM are all in the same piece of hardware. There is no MPI required. That makes perfect sense. And it's also cost effective from what we've heard from the podcasts and everything else. And so that is one option, but currently that option is kind of only available if you choose the ROM cartridge route. We've got Ed Snyder's board, which is similar to yours, that also has some analog or some digital joysticks adapters, but it's a great board. But now that requires a multi-pack. How many people own a multi-pack? Will buy one or will use one? Does that factor into potential sales? So, so all these questions come up, and so we live in a time now where we went from having no sound hardware to almost hardware fragmentation, oversaturation. So that, and you touched on that. I mentioned this a long time ago when John Strong was starting to talk about how he was going to do sound hardware too, and he was doing a similar chip that what John Linville is doing. And sometimes you kind of don't want to duplicate efforts. You want to maybe maximize these efforts and maybe share these knowledges and things where more people can benefit from it. And you're kind of in that midst right now. So I thought it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that a little further, and maybe Nick to chime in too, since he's currently developing something.
No, that's fine. Well, as I indicated, it's kind of interesting that John started out. He had this unit that he put into his game cartridge idea for the Game Master capability. Ed, I actually didn't know Ed was working on a PSG. I think he's calling it CoCo PSG. I read somewhere that the deluxe color computer was going to have an AY, General Instruments AY 38910 chip in it, and I thought, well, I ought to grab this chip and see what it's like and see what capability it has. But now, dependent towards, and of course, as you indicated, John Strong's got an idea as well for another capability. So we've got these 4 options, and then of course I read Nick's Gunstar blog entry last night or this morning or something about a software capability that's kind of mimicking the AY sound capability, and so that puts quite a few different options on the table. Then the speech sound pack capability that you talked about and showed off in MAME a couple weeks ago on this show. There's some other capabilities that it provides as well, and so at the end of the day, it's I'm looking at this market and seeing it having so many options, and how do you cut through which options are possible to which options are preferable, so that you can get to a product, if there is even a product that makes sense. Nick makes an excellent point that if I have to have a cartridge and I have to implement something, and then I have they need a CoCo SDC in order to run my game, then that means they have to have an MPI. There's no way around it. And what if they don't have an MPI? Then that's just the end of that discussion. So it's a struggle. I have sitting right here. I had it on the earlier. I was showing it off, but this is actually version 2 of a CoCo PSG type product. But there's been like a lack of motivation on my part to continue working on it, because I just don't know what kinds of things are of most interest to the marketplace that they're willing to be, that they want to see turned into a product. Because, one of the things I enjoy setting these things up and putting them together. So one of the thrills I have is when somebody's in a chat room or a forum or a discussion list or whatever, and they say, man, I don't know how to do this, but it would be really neat if I could have X, and X is hardware, right? Well, then that's a challenge and an opportunity for somebody like me to say, ooh, I wonder if I could do that, because I can do it, right? So, if I have some time, or the topic interests me or whatnot, I might throw together some hardware very quickly. And then you get to this step where you have an actual unit, but then the question is, so I've got one, and so the idea has merit, but does the product have merit? Does this particular product have merit? And that's where I am struggling right now, because, I thought maybe if I had the best of both worlds, I would do that. So this particular unit right here is a version 2 unit, and it actually has, as I indicated earlier, or maybe I was talking last night, this unit actually has both sound chips. So it has the AY chip, and underneath the AY chip, it has John Linville's SN76489 chip sitting underneath it. And so it supports it's stereo, and it supports 2 of these chips plus 2 of the same chip that John Linville's using in his cartridge. But then you've got other individuals who are saying, well, these particular ICs here are more chiptune type units. They're good for doing chiptunes, but what if you want to hear real sound, like you want to hear drums, or you want to hear a violin or whatnot? Well, these chips are not good for that. They're chiptune chips. So, and then what do you do about that? And that's a capability that the CoCo doesn't have. So maybe you do better to work on implementing a cartridge with one of those types of chips, because you're never going to get that type of sound. Well, I won't say never, but it's going to be much harder and much more CPU intensive to get a violin sound out of a...
Sure. Now you're really talking about like a general MIDI sound set on a chip at this point.
Correct.
And as much as would that be nice to do? Yes, but was that even possible back then? Was that, what the term is it period correct? Could we have had that chip in the 80s or late 80s on the CoCo? Not that that's the deciding factor when you're going to do something, but, they're challenges. And then we also have to look at not only what's the market for consumers, what's the market for developers? Because I think we could probably count on one hand the people who are actively working on commercial products. You've got like John Strong, John Linville, Nick Marentes. I know I'm missing a few people, but there's not a lot of people who are working on actively commercial products. We're lucky to get a few per year that come out. So there has not only is there a market for the consumers for the hardware, but there has to be a market for the developers and to create the products to use this hardware, and that's an even smaller market when it comes to the people that can develop for it.
No,
at the moment, anyways.
You're right. I don't. The problem is that I see the problem, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that sees the problem. But I'm not really seeing necessarily a quick and easy solution right now because, you know, like I indicated, and I've indicated things. A product out that's a greenfield, so a sound cartridge, let's say. If you bring a product out like that, then people typically aren't going to buy it until there's software that takes advantage of it, and people probably aren't going to develop for it until they know there's people that own it.
Right. It's the chicken and egg thing here.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things, I don't know, Nick, when you want to chime in, but you were also saying, well, if I was going to develop for any type of external sound, the minute you use external sound, because it has to come in on one of these cartridge lines through the bus, it automatically disables the DAC, so you can't use your own sample mixings with synthesis?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that on the blog.
Yeah.
I was hoping to be able to support the DAC so that everyone has access to the digital sampled sound effects that I do at the moment. And if you have a card, a sound card, it can be mixed in with that, so you get the best of both worlds. So, but unfortunately, you can't mix the two. It's one or the other.
Yeah, that's just that's a limitation of the CoCo cartridge slot, then, right?
Yeah, that's a design limitation that Tandy added.
Infinite Tandy wisdom, right?
And called it
a feature. So at the end of the day, if I was, you know, it's easy to put in a request and to you know, put the wish out there. It almost sounds like if the CoCo SDC had a great synthesizer and DAC capability that could come through either on the same line or at least have like a stereo headset out that did mix them. That might be the best of all worlds, where you don't have, you know, you can put everything on a disk image, have like Orchestra 90 DAC and a synthesizer on the same CoCo SDC card, and then boom, problem solved.
That was what I thought was going to happen, because I thought Darren had sent I don't know if it was a cryptic, but it was kind of a preliminary note to the mailing list, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or so, and said, hey, I've been playing around with kind of this new kind of feature, and he had some sound generation capabilities on a CoCo SDC prototype that he was working on, and gave a little bit of information on that. But I didn't hear anything more about it, and then later on, I think Nick communicated to him and asked about, you know, what's the production status of that kind of capability, and the indication I heard was that he wasn't going to move further with it. And so that kind of is, you know, that's a challenge, right? Because you're right, it would be probably best to put that kind of capability right on the CoCo SDC PCB itself.
Yeah. So Karen just came in. And he says, this sounds like a job for dun 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 self-modifying code man. Is there such thing as self-modifying hardware at this point? Because now we've really gone into Judgment Day when that happens.
That's right.
Yeah. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Was that David Ladd chiming in?
Yes, I had a crazy idea. Since the CoCo, you can't have the internal DAC mixed with the cartridge slot's audio line. With these music chips, how much of a pain in the rump would it be to add in the Orchestra 90 DAC layout, and then the coder, if they want the music chips, move the address of their CoCo DAC for the CoCo 3 to the Orchestra 90 addressing. That way, all the audio mixing is being done on the card with the Orchestra 90 and the music chips.
So let me see if I can understand what you're suggesting. You're saying have the Orchestra 90 capability on the cartridge, and then what else? Have the DAC functionality on the cartridge as well?
Well,
okay.
The Orchestra 90 is a DAC. So what I'm saying is with these music chips you already have here.
Yep.
Is there a way to still fit in the Orchestra 90's DACs on the board with the chips? That way you have the DACs for the PCM.
Yep.
and the music chips, and then for like a programmer wants to support an external audio, they can then use their PCM samples right to the Orchestra 90 address and still have the music from the chips all on the one cart. Would that be an option?
I think that's, I mean, yes, absolutely putting the Orchestra 90 capability on this. Like you can see right here, you know, if you were to go to a 4-layer board, you've got a lot of room here that you could implement an Orchestra 90 capability. The question I think you might even be able to, since the DAC is just a specific location in memory, and you can see that location in memory on this cartridge, you may even be able to hijack those writes and, you know, have them go here. The only thing you wouldn't be able to do is you'd have to find a way to tell the selector, don't use the internal DAC output, use the output from the cartridge. I guess if you're writing a new game that supports that, then you would already know that you can do that. And that's what you could do. You could mix the channels on the cartridge. So yes, I think it's possible to do that, especially for new development.
And at that point, everything has to come out through like a headphone jack because it's not going to make its way back into the CoCo.
No, if you do it on a new game, then you'd set the selector to say, this cartridge right here is this cartridge I want to get the sound from.
Yeah. All the cartridge sound would be fed in, and since you've got a DAC and a sound chip on the cartridge,
okay, so you mix those two things and send them through the same single line.
They're already mixed on the cartridge and then fed in.
Okay.
I mean, it's not an impossible situation. You can always do it externally and plug in a cable, earphone jack cable from the cartridge with a Y connector and just merge the two signals in externally and feed that to a amplifier or whatever. So it's not impossible, but we're just trying to go for a clean solution.
Yeah. And I guess it's early enough in the game where it could still be. It's really. I know this probably came up in the podcast before. It almost seems like sometimes you want to know, is there a project registry where, you know, when people are working on things, how about we throw it all out there so we know what people are working on? And that, you know, there's different schools of thoughts on that. But then it starts to talk about, well, you know, what's the greater good? The consumer should be the goal. So let's all put together something that's going to be great for consumers and developers, and let's work on a standard.
Yeah. The problem, you know, obviously, you know, the problem with letting people, and I think I mentioned this at last year at the Vintage Computer Festival Midwest. I had a presentation and I was talking about projects in general, and that's online on YouTube somewhere. But one of the things I pointed out is it's always a real challenge as you go to develop products for this space. It's a challenge as to when you tell people that your product or that your project exists, right? Because if you tell people too early, then the clock starts ticking as soon as you tell them, right? So, not to put Curtis on the spot, right? But as soon as Curtis sees a 2 meg flash or 2 meg RAM upgrade, he wants to know when it's going to be available, because he knows that OS 9 can support 2 meg right out of the bat, and he knows that the gimme replacement is going on from Ed, and so it makes logical sense that they would be together. But there is a huge, huge amount of road to travel between the time these projects start and what Curtis is suggesting would be a really good idea. And I think that's a challenge. But if you wait too long to tell people that you're interested in doing a project, then you end up kind of in the situation we're in right now, where you've got independent people and they're saying, you know what, I don't want to tell people too early because I'm not sure this is going to be a reality. So I'll wait until I'm, relatively done, and then I'll announce it. Well, somebody else already came up with the same idea or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it's a real challenge as to when you do that. And the other one is, some people will get a really cool idea and then lose interest in finishing it up.
Yeah.
And so you get somebody that gets partway through a design and then they say, you know what, this has gotten hard and I'm not having fun anymore, and so I'm giving up on it. And then you got all these people that were kind of hoping that it would end up being a product, and now their hopes are dashed.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. These are some of the slippery slope that we have here. The good stuff, though. But, I've kind of been aware of the whole concept of the retro community in general and the CoCo community for only about 2 years. And I've been nothing but amazed about what is going on in both the hardware and the software space. And now even more of things like FPGA and stuff like that. It is impressive that we have people who know how to do these things and who do these things. And they do come out pretty frequently, and everything is pretty reasonably priced. You were alluding to, there's a sweet spot, and $50 is probably that price. And I'll buy just about anything for $50 because that's an adult. I got adult money, and that's an adult purchase. But when you get more than that, then you have to justify that to the significant other, So because CoCo, right? We'll just leave it at that.
That's right. That's right.
This has been a great subject, but have we beat it to death?
It's fine by me.
Yeah.
If there's anybody that has more questions, that's fine. Otherwise, happy to be done.
John's been here. John Mark Mobley has been here. I don't know if he said too much because I had paused my sound a few times. John, anything you want to say? And we're very happy to have you here from Glenside.
The club is strong and growing, and we're getting new members, and everything is going well. Jim, I talked to Jim Brain at one of our get-togethers, and he recommended that I try something called Verilog Icarus.
Okay.
And I've been experimenting with that and made quite a bit of progress with it. So I'm very grateful to Jim Brain for sending me in that direction.
And that's one of the programming environments or languages that you use to program the hardware?
It's a simulator, so you can simulate without having real hardware. You can simulate your hardware.
Hold on, my head just exploded again. we're simulating the emulated hardware with emulation and software.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, John, I just brought up the Glenside website. Is there anything you want me to pull up on the website while I have it up?
Well, the calendar is really good to look at.
Okay.
There's a next button, and you can advance to the next month.
Okay, so you have Kansas Fest on here in July. You have our club meetings, Commodore Vegas Expo. Then we get into August. We've got the Coleco Retro. We've got the Glenside Club meetings in August. I tell you what, I love living in Florida. I've lived in Florida my whole life, but if I had to pick another city, it would probably be near you guys, just so I could come to CoCo Club meetings once a month. It's kind of cool.
You can join online. We have people use Google Hangouts, and they join the meeting.
Yeah. It'd be better to be there in person. Vintage Computer Festival Midwest. I almost feel like I'm listening to announcements on the CoCo Crew podcast right now. Tentative club meeting, first day of autumn. That's important. Mark your calendars there. Tandy Assembly, October 7th and 8th in Chillicothe, Ohio. Another club meeting. TI International World Fair. And so what are the dates again for CoCo Fest 28? I'll get to those. I'm fast forwarding right now. We're going to April. Here we go. CoCo Fest, April 21st and 22nd of April 2018. All right. Those are the official dates right there. And I'm definitely hoping to make my third. This will be my third annual CoCo Fest. So it's been great. It's been great. Very, very cool. Let's look at the Tandy Assembly website real quick too. Let's see what's new and exciting there. If anything else has developed there. We still have our same primary speakers right now: Scott Adams, Don French, Lance Miklas. Exhibitors. We have myself. We have got Mike Rowan, Myro. We've got Richard Lorbieski. Peter and Alex Satinsky, Mark and Sandy from Cloud9, Peter Bartlett and Malcolm Ramey, TRS-80 with modern upgrades, Randy Kindig, Retro Innovations, Mr. Jim Brain himself will be there. Ian Maverick all the way from Australia, good eye, the Mav will be there. Brendan Donahue will be here at this CoCo VGA, and Alan Hightower as a Tandy 12345K PC compatibles. What the hell is that?
No clue.
No clue. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Sequential numbers. Our sponsors right now include The Right Stuff, John Benson, Boys and Tech, Brendan Donna, he is a sponsor. Floppy Days is a sponsor. CoCo Crew Podcast and Trash Talks are sponsors. Good stuff. Obviously, you can. This is tandyassembly.com, and you can contact them at tandyassembly@gmail.com. Make your reservations if you haven't done so already. Good stuff. Good stuff. You guys want to hear another Myro clip?
Yes.
Sure.
All right, let's see. We're gonna pick one here. So that was CoCo Renew. We've got a CoCo TV clip. We've got Color Speak ad. That was kind of cool. JL. Oh yeah, here we go. We're gonna listen to John Linville singing because you gotta have more Linville, right? So let's do that right now. I'm gonna switch over here. Oh, what a treat! This podcast has been a treat indeed. Here we go. Here's John Linville singing for us.
CoCo. You don't have to boot up OS 9. Now that we're older, we like to play deck B games. They're alright. CoCo. You don't have to boot that disc tonight. We'll play some Farfall or take Popstar Pilot for a flight. CoCo. You don't have to boot up OS 9. CoCo. You don't have to boot up OS 9. CoCo 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 boot up OS 9. Oh.
It doesn't get much better than that, and the only way it gets any better is let's hear Basic. Where did it go? Where's Basic? Mysterious CoCo. That was okay. Color Speak ad. CoCo TV clip. CoCo Renew. CoCo Group 2. What one is this? Ah, that was pretty good. That's a long piece. I don't have the Basic one in here. Oh, okay. That was cool though. That was definitely cool. So yeah, another great podcast, and definitely having Myro come to the mix has been a nice addition to the show. Not only as him being another member of the crew and another speaker on the thing, but all of his value added content. You know. Oh, okay. Here we go. This is what John Linville's saying. So it's a Tandy 1000, 2000, 3000, 4000, and 5000 display. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5K. It's one of all the Ks. Okay, so it's a 1000, 2000, 3000, 4000, and 5000. Wow.
Got it.
Holy crap, do we need a big table for that with reinforcements to support the weight, probably. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I think we had a good CoCo talk. We've gone over 3 hours now, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Hardware has been a mystery to me for the longest time because I didn't get into hardware until I got into more traditional PC clone form factors, and that level of hardware is you literally replace the entire component. Like you replace the modem, you replace the graphics card. That is my level of component level troubleshooting and repair. I've never touched a soldering iron, and I don't know electronics. So it's really interesting, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share it with not only my dumb ass, but everybody else too, because it's kind of cool to break it down into relatable terms.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Likewise, and so it's go4retro.com, right?
It is go4retro.com, and we found out that what was it, David? That the IEC cables that they use on the Commodore are the same as the joystick cables. Is that right?
Yes. and that actually worked very well for my project. Which, since you brought that up, I want to say something publicly here. I want to say thank you to you, Jim, and John Strong, and those who have been in the hardware area that has given me help to jumpstart my little project, since this is the first time I've never before built anything that's hardware that interfaced with anything else before.
Wow.
And remind us what
That's
that
one
is
of the
again.
that's one of the reasons why.
What is it, David?
Well, my project is a PS2 mouse interface to CoCo joystick adapter. So you can have a way to use a PS2 mouse on a CoCo.
Very cool. Yeah, I think one of the things that I notice is that there's this kind of snowball of inspiration and motivation that we get from the community, where one person's project inspires another person to do something else. And I think that video that Glenn Hewlett did is a perfect example of that, where, you know, something I did inspired Myro to make a song, which inspired me to make a music video, which inspired Glenn Hewlett to make a CoCo transcoded video, you know. So the fact that people are inspiring and motivating and even helping people do things, I think it says a lot about this community. And I also want to maybe close with just looking at some numbers here too, because it's talking about the community. So there's some things I've done recently, and the response I've gotten has exceeded my expectations. So like I just released Dungeon Raid right before the podcast. I'm calling it the podcast, but CoCo TALK today, right? I've already gotten 47 views on my Dungeon Raid video that's only been out for a couple of hours. That's pretty damn good. This Bedlam video that I put out, it's almost reached 200 views already, and I waited a long time to release a text adventure video because I just didn't think anybody would want to watch text, you know, and listen to, I mean, nobody wants to hear me speak, you know, so when you're reading off the text, I'm doing nothing but speaking. That's gotten almost 200 views. That has completely exceeded my expectations. Last week's CoCo Talk about OS 9, pretty popular show. We've gotten 172 views. Rick Adams' bomb threat video has gotten 107 views. Pac-Man, 170. Myro interview, 100 views. CoCo Talk, that was just a promo clip. The CoCo surgery video, almost 175 views. Oh, that was CoCo Talk. Yeah, okay. CoCo Talk 17, where we talked about bomb threat, almost 180 views. You know, so and then you look at something I do that's new, like this game here I did, Alien Isolation. That's gotten 27 views. So the things that are more, you would think that would be more likely for somebody to want to watch, the newer things, I'm getting no love on. But the old things here, I'm really getting some support as well by people watching this stuff. And I think that's just kind of going back to what David Ladd was saying, is that people are inspiring each other. And, you know, the games that exist inspire me to want to play them. I get suggestions on games to play, and that inspires me to want to record a video. Dungeon Raid was a suggestion. So, I think, you know, everybody's trying to help motivate and inspire and you know, give people ideas and support and things like that, which is really, really cool, you know?
Cool. Impressive.
Yeah.
Indeed it is.
Oh,
I agree.
Thank you, Mark Overholzer. You know, the CoCo Crew podcast does such a great job of just recognizing people who do projects, you know, big or small. Just that sense of community, that sense of awareness. It's like a lot of things I hear don't sink in right away until later on, and it's hard to remember because they talk about so many things, and they're on 28 episodes now. I have heard so much in the way of news and tech segments. It doesn't all sink in, and you don't all remember it all, but over time, you know, in the past 2 years, I have learned so much about how the color computer works and what software development is like and what the hardware process is and stuff. And I am far from an expert in any means, but I feel much more informed and educated. I feel like I can have, if it's not a completely intelligent conversation, I can at least hopefully ask some somewhat intelligent questions to help raise my awareness. I know enough to ask hopefully smarter questions rather than completely dumb questions. And that's due to the podcast and the community and the mailing list and Facebook and all these things. You know, I think we're lifting each other up. And I'll leave it on that. On that dead silence. I'm waiting for the crickets to stop.
No, crickets moved into your room.
Yes. All right. So have we beat this one to death?
Well, I did need to make a correction.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Earlier I said Icarus, but apparently it's Icarus. It's not Icarus.
Icarus, that's a bird.
Yeah. So it's Verilog Icarus.
Okay. That's also a great song from Iron Maiden, Flight of the Icarus. Cool stuff, cool stuff. All right, well, I always like to close with my favorite quote, which is, you may only be young once, but you can be retro forever. So I invite you all to be retro forever, and hopefully everyone believes in CoCo forever. And I want to thank Mark Overholzer and David Ladd and Bill Nobel and Jim Brain and Nick Marentis and John Mark Mobley and everybody else who was with us. Let's acknowledge everybody in the chat. Rudy Kazuti and Curtis Boyle, even, we'll give him some recognition. Sixy was here. Travis Pope stopped by. Wayne Campbell was here. Who else was in the chat today? Sockmaster was in the chat for quite a bit today, too. Fedor Steeman stopped by. John Linville is here. James Ross was here. Paco Atakte, that's one of Drencor's personalities. Davey Mitchell was one of the first people joining the show. Cool Gamer Hades, I don't even know. Rudy Kazuti again, yes. James Ross, I think I'm repeating myself. I'm scrolling backwards right now. Yep. I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. But yeah, we have over 12.5 people watching us live. And, we get close to 200 views each week, which is not bad for this being a very niche thing. And so I'm very grateful for the people who watch us live and the people who watch us on the replays and the people who help make this call exist every week, because there's no way I could do it by myself. There's just no way. I'm just so thanks. Let me just throw out one more thing. Here's my thought for next week, and I'll put out a social media post too. So next week's going to be CoCo Talk number 20, and to me that's kind of a cool milestone. It's an even number. It's a fairly significant number. I thought I would like to make that show just a no holds barred, no structured, freeform discussion, and I'd love to get as many people to call in on Skype as possible and give everybody a chance to talk about whatever. You don't have to be a person who's done a project or have any experience or expertise. I know a lot of people feel, I don't want to do this because I don't, it's not a question of who's better or who's done what. It's not about your resume. It's really just about, do you love the CoCo and do you want to talk about the CoCo? So I would just love CoCo Talk to be a complete talk with lots of people on a Skype call, and not just the usual suspects, but more people from the community. So for those of you who watch us on YouTube, I'd love to have some of the YouTube viewers call in to Skype as well. So if you guys want to be on next week's talk or any other talk, I'm going to put my Skype ID out there in the Skype chat too. It's just OG Stevie Stroh. So add me as a Skype friend, and I'm thinking that's kind of my idea for next week is to celebrate 20 episodes and just have let's all just talk about what we want to talk about. No particular topic or agenda, but just talk about what we love and what we don't love. And maybe I might even have time to show off a retro CoCo Pi thing next week too, because mine's coming in tomorrow. So that's my working idea for next week.
Okie dokie.
All right, guys. So thank you all for being here, and thank you everybody for watching. Nick Marentis too. Sorry, I forgot to mention you, handsome gentleman there. I'm old, man. I'm old. I forget things. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, guys. CoCo forever. Myro. It will catch on. Grant Leedy was here too. Yes, Rudy Kazuti was here. Rudy Kazuti says, thanks for the Dungeon Raid video. Thanks for the suggestion, Rudy. Yes, Myro. It will catch on. All right, we're out of here, people. Till next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.